Okay. Hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining a Concrete Matter sharing session number 14. Today we are honored to invite two speakers, Taufiq and Suffian, who's not yet in yet, but then we'll see him soon for today's topic. Let me share my screen. Okay. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, today is going to be a casual session on 4-question, 1 conversation. So during this session, we are going to talk about it's actually a conversation format, so you are free to ask any question during the session, and we'll be asking 4 big questions, and then each question will take about 30 minutes. So it will be moderated by 3 of us, me, Joyee, and Yvonne, and Gary. So after first 2 questions will be a 5-minute breaks, and then followed by another 2 questions. Okay. Yeah, so I think today we have a very nice crowd, about like 20 plus people. So I think it's a good intimate session. So don't be afraid to ask any question. Yep. So just a short introductions for our today's speaker. So we are honored to invite Mr. Taufiq and Suffian, both are director in their respective design firms, Design Framework and Six Design Office. So just a little bit of the background. So for those that I think we all know both speakers, maybe just a quick one would be Taufiq. It's an urban designer and strategic, and then he founded with his partner DFW, Design Framework. So they are a practice who focus much on the development strategies or city planning. So they have done notably the Kampong Baru master plan and city center design and other private developments. So also very actively involved in a lot of architectural pavilions or design. Wait, sorry, someone is coming in. Okay, yeah, some other designs, competitions and activities as well, and he has been an active graduate member in CAM. So so you may jump in and explain, introduce yourself later. You want to?
I like this slide. Maybe I can mention a bit. So just a bit of background, maybe for some of you who may already know me, like Nazmi, we used to be peers actually. So I think I started off working with Veritas when I came back from graduating from Oxford School of Architecture, or Oxford Brookes University. That was 2011 or 12, and then at that time I was asked to lead and set up the design core, which focuses on design and also competition work or any design intensive work in a corporate architecture setting, which I think I left in 2016. So from 2016 onwards, with Design Framework, I think initially the focus was by then was actually to look into leveraging on my specialization then from doing a lot of urban development strategy work, which produces a lot of this development strategy master plan. So in 2016, when I left, it was the Kampong Baru Comprehensive Development Master Plan, which is actually the second revision to the current Kampong Baru Master Plan. So the current master plan version, I think, is revision 4, and it's done by the current team in Veritas. But I think the main outcome from that was actually the idea of public space linking between the green corridor between KLCC Park and Kampong Baru. And it was actually how can public space, and the urban fabric be the main economic generator, or the relationship between the two adjacent districts. I think later on in 2017 and 18, I was actually asked by DBKL to come back and work on another development strategy master plan, which included, Bukit Bintang. which included the areas of Jalan Alor, Bukit Bintang, and Jalan Alor, Bukit Bintang, and Imbi, the Imbi neighborhood. And this was, again, utilizing the client was City Hall, utilizing how public spaces can positively affect real estate and development, and what were the type of physical development scenarios that we would encounter in the future. When it comes to redevelopment of, I think, a shopping district, which is Bukit Bintang, Jalan Alor, which is a heritage and very street centric district, and then also Imbi, which is a bit non-place, but with the potential of becoming a residential district in the city. And I think fast forward, like in continuation in 2020, I'm currently participating in the Kuala Lumpur Physical Master Plan draft review, which I had submitted a 14-page out of a total 20-page report. I think the co-writer is Architect Mustafa, and we were basically called back by City Hall. In terms of design framework, although we focus on urban design and strategy, we also try to include urban culture and visual curation as a type of work. But in 2019 and 2020, my interests have grew into urban tech and urban technology. So I think a lot of my work currently deals with seeing how can a design strategy practice get into urban technology. Yeah, so I think that's generally the overview for design framework. Suffian's here actually.
Yeah, as well. But thank you so much.
I'm so sorry. My apologies. I just got totally mixed up with the time. But
no worries, no worries.
Here, I drove back like a crazy man.
Thank God. Thank God you're safe. You reach home safely. It's okay. You're on time. Because we're about to go to the next slide, which is your introduction. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are we going to Taufiq? Are we going through the slides, which just transitions into what we've done, or I'm just going to introduce myself first?
I think we followed the moderators format.
Yeah. So we are going to have an introduction first, and then we're going to explain a bit of the topic of today, and then before we dive into discussing in depth. So if you have anything to share, and do let us know as well. Yeah. So again, thank you, Taufiq, for the thorough explanation on design framework. I think the big scale project, the master plan, they're very good. They're very amazing. But apart from that, you do as an active graduate member in PAM as well, right?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. So my initiation with PAM began in 2016. To be honest, as a student, I studied at UiTM Shah Alam from 2001. So that would tell you my age until 2006. I did not know anything about PAM or LAM. I do know KM because they did a portfolio review in my graduation year into 2006. And then when I came back from England with my postgrad diploma or my part 2, I still did not know PAM or LAM. That was 2011 or 12. Okay. And by 2016, I think by virtue of, because I was working under Lilian Tay, past PAM president now, that was when that was the first time that I sat in any meeting with PAM. And I think I came in into the CLEF committee that was directed by David Tay, past PAM president. And then I was involved in the CLEF Acts and also the Datum Design, the design forum. where I proposed to that we invited young designers, which include Warif and Jun Ong in the speakers list. And Clefax was actually about diversification of content. I think you had Hafiz Amirul, and then we had graffiti, we had dance, photography. So that was about different things. And moving forward, in various years, I participated in curating a few Clef sub-events. And I think in 2019, 2020, I was actually assisting a PAM president as a strategic officer up till February this year. So that was actually a lot of policy research work support. Apart from that, I'm a member of the PAM graduate committee and also the PAM POP is what again? Promotion of practice.
Promotion of practice.
Okay.
Yeah, committee. Yeah. Okay. And by virtue of continuity, with anything relating with the BKL, like the low carbon city blueprint, and also the PSKL, the Plan Structure Kuala Lumpur draft. And also in supporting work, I looked at the promotion of the Venice Biennale policy and paper, which relates to architecture and creative economy, set with NPC in the technology cluster for professional practice. And also, and contributive in co-writing the paper for the RM12, Rancangan Malaysia 12 for ACS or AES, Architecture Engineering Services.
That's the latest project that's involving with PAM, is it?
Yeah, that was the stint of work that I did from the duration of September 2019 to February 2020. Yeah.
I see. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you for sharing. Yeah. So thank you. Moving on to our second speakers of today, Mr. Suffian Shahabuddin. So he's the director at 6 Design Office, which has 2 offices, one in Malaysia and one in Melbourne. So Mr. Suffian has past overseas working experience, and especially in Melbourne for at least a decade. Am I right? Correct me if I'm wrong. And then slightly more. And he received a degree in local uni and also his master's in University of Melbourne. So perhaps do you want to elaborate more on your office and also perhaps elaborate some of your involvement with the local architectural body, PAM or LAM?
Yes, I was wondering if I could share my screen.
Yeah, definitely you can. Let me just stop share. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, share screen. Hope you need to enable me.
Sorry. Yep, go ahead. Oh.
All right. So
okay.
Here we go. My name is Suffian. Some of you might know me from the work that I've done, mostly probably with PAM. I started a design office called 6 Design Office. When we first came back, it was supposed to be just called Design Office. But when we wanted to register, they said it wasn't unique enough. So we needed to put something in front. So we just chose a number. And the number became 6 because of the number of directors. So we have 4 of us here in KL and 2 in Melbourne. So in total, there's 6 of us. Most of our jobs actually are a mix of not only different scales, they are different types of work, speculative. Some of it involve BIM and some of it even ID and just even architecture. So we do a whole diverse type of work. But I think I wanted to go back a little in the beginning, how it all started. I think when we started off, it was, I think we were very young. We just wanted to do competitions. We did a whole bunch of competitions, but we didn't have offices, so we worked at the library. Went to friends. I think a friend of ours, who didn't work in an architectural office, so they had their weekends free. So in the weekends, we would drop by his office, the 4 or 5 of us, and just worked on competitions. And we were quite successful. Some of those competitions, although not winning them, we were shortlisted in the finals, and I think that kind of created an appreciation between fellow colleagues, who eventually became our partners. So that, I think that's the beginning of Six. Some of us came back to Malaysia. Others decided to stay on in Melbourne, but I think because of technology and how we worked, it just made things very possible to work on different sides of the globe, but still getting things to happen. So I started work back in 2006. With a range of offices. My first office actually was with a Chinese architect who set up the Chinese angle for DCM. So they had all the projects in China, and he was the go-to guy. And then he left DCM and started his own practice, which was David Cheah and Partners. So I did a lot of traveling. I did a lot of work. They were mostly schematic design work in Chongqing, Guangzhou, I think Manila, the Philippines, and also, but mostly in China. And we did competitions as well. And then after that, I decided I wanted to concentrate and actually get real building work. So I went to Middle-East Partnership, where we did a lot of health work, a lot of hospitals that ranged from 3 million and went all the way up to $1 billion. So it was one of the biggest projects in the world at the time. And we were transitioning. There was a lot of hype and learning about BIM, which we had to really learn and get on board. And from there, I think it was a steep learning curve. But I learned a lot. I got registered in the process, and somewhere within 2013, I came back and started Six in Malaysia. So that was where I think I was running ever since I came back. So every little thing, not only architecture, networking, the business aspects of it was quite new, but it was the tuition that I needed to go through. And I think it's quite similar with everyone who started their own thing. And I think why we're here today is because I'd like to share those experiences. I think the experiences, what differences there are culturally, and I think how everyone can benefit from the whole process. Sorry, the azan is happening right now. Am I still quite clear?
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I just wanted, I think when I came back, there was a lot of frustrations. There was a lot of learning, but at the same time, we took a lot of positives as well. But the frustration that I got was has manifested into becoming kind of like a keyboard warrior, which I wrote a lot, and then it just went straight into social media, either on Instagram or Facebook. So even in terms of I mostly directed it to Lam and Pam, which I think anyone with grievances in the local architectural industry would probably focus their attention on Lem and Pam, and that's what I did. And of course, a lot of these discussions were about the global environment and also about how that translated locally and trending issues at the time. So I think it was always very intriguing for me to take up these issues and then translate it locally and find where were the opportunities for us to progress, but at the same time, the limitations. And of course, it brought things up like registration, professional registration, which always has been an interesting topic, a topic that we've talked about since the beginning. I think every graduate architect goes into post-graduation thinking the next step would be part 3. But sometimes that might be the way, sometimes it might not. Who knows? But I think why we're here is we're trying to figure out the different types of routes, but also getting people around us to actually share their experiences. So whatever decisions you do decide to make is fairly informed. And I think similar to the topic today, we're discussing is it a continuation of a worrying trend? Is the profession dying? What's going to happen with it? Is it all doom and gloom? I think these were the things that we started to discuss. So when things were kind of a bit stable, 2017, 2018, I started this sort of just sharing sessions. It was called After 6. So it was kind of beyond 6 itself and after 6 o'clock, because people started just finish work and then they could kind of come by to the office and then just share some of their experiences. So this was, it wasn't just architects, it was people who started out in business, had different types of businesses. So the idea was you'd face similar problems as a startup, but at the same time, you could probably share your unique experiences in dealing with those problems, and they could probably cross-collaborate somehow and also provide sort of learning opportunities for other businesses. So I think at the end of the day, it's about the daily grind. I think you think once you graduate, you go through the process, and then suddenly 10 to 20 years go by, and then you're thinking, what have you achieved? Of course, as architects, we're quite passionate people, and I think doing the work itself or breathing the air of great architects is sometimes enough, but it might not be enough for everyone. So I think for the other people, or I think other graduates as well, like where do you go? How do you get informed? And how do you make those decisions? So I think that's where we are today. And as architects, I don't want to see it as being doom and gloom. I think when you decide to be an architect, you are naturally an optimistic person. You look at buildings, or you look at design, or you look at plain sight, and you see the best of it. And I think that's how you should approach life as well. So I think this is where, I mean, for a lot of new architects starting out your career, it shouldn't be, oh no, mati lah, we're going to die because registration is so hard. I've failed for the second time, and what do I do now? So I think you just got to be optimistic, and that's what I think that's one of the strengths of architects, and it's pretty much how you should move forward. And this kind of coincided with, I think, the change of government at the time. There was an air of optimism that happened. It starting again. There was the what you call the new normal, which everybody was talking about, but it wasn't really. I think it was the opportunity for change, and a platform for change. But I think we were still a bit unready, and hence I think what's happened today. But we took it up. At the time, there was the Institutional Reforms Committee, which just asked for submissions, and we just decided to hand in a memorandum, which Taufiq and we got together, brainstorm a bit, and we probably had 4 days just to put it together.
Oh, wow.
And we
Okay, 4
ran to
days.
the building. I remember that day. Yeah, we got it printed in the morning. I think took a grab together because we expected a lot of people to be at IB Tower. Got off, went to the 16th floor and saw all the different groups there. So it was an exciting time. I think but it was more so about I think putting pen to paper and creating action from our thoughts. So as probably if you just going back a bit from my presentation, before it was just a lot of being angry, not doing a lot about it, just talking on social media and then with a few friends, and then suddenly you feel like your own champion, but then it's not really going anywhere. And then you get to a point where there is an opportunity to do something, and I think that's what needs to be done. You just got to do something and get people around you, like-minded people, and start doing things about it. So that's what we did. So the following year was interesting. I think now that we started something, like Taufiq and I, we got together, and then we got this good energy happening. So what do we do with it? We initially started something called Malaysian Young Architects, but it was very early days. We talked to a lot of architects, but it was hard to get traction because one, it wasn't mainstream, and two, I think we weren't established. Technically, we were nobodies. And I think just to get people on board, I think we needed to create a track record. So we decided to do things by ourselves, got together, write papers, and of course one of it was the memorandum. But then what happened was after that, so that's not a picture of me though, but it was an article just showing that the document later became a secret document because I think it exposed many other things. Although the agenda brought by Young Architects probably wasn't up there on top of the list, but I think it just uncovered a lot of inefficiencies.
So there was no updates or no follow-ups after the submission for the memorandum.
No, it was locked down. The report was there, and we never heard about it again. So that kind of put a damper on things.
And that was in 2017, am I right?
Yes. No, this was in 2018.
Okay.
2
years ago.
The PRU,
the PRU just immediately after. So beginning of the year, they said they'd released. Actually, it was the end of the year. They said they would release the report after after going through all the different reports. But at the end of the day, beginning of the year, they just said it's going to be secret. So nobody knows. I don't know.
Okay.
But we needed to keep on going. So this is where I think I think Nazmi as well invited me to talk to the students at Taylor's, the final years, about the new Malaysia and what I thought about what we were going to do. So I think we just needed to keep that energy going and start to have conversations. And we also looked at regional kind of younger architects, what they did and how they got involved. So of course, me being an architect from Melbourne, I always I still follow the Victorian chapter and what they do, and I think this was kind of where I got thinking about maybe we need to be a bit more mainstream. Maybe we need to approach our own institution. Maybe the institution needs to get to know us. So I think this is where I thought, okay, let's go about it this way now. So I got a bit friendly with Pam. I got friendly through mainly the football. Of course, I think a lot of Malaysians would kind of get a bit, what's the word? They get a bit apprehensive if you come straightforward and a bit, I think, straight and just a bit
Game strong.
provocative. Yeah, the game strong. So I needed to find another way, and I think everybody loves football, so they didn't see me coming. So the football, we won it. We were world champions, although it was just between 5 nations. And people started to take notice and then said, oh, let's invite him to join council. So that's pretty much what I did. And of course, Lillian at the time had her agenda. She wanted to get younger architects in, because we, of course, with the whole rise in digital technology, digital transformation, I think there needed to be new conversations, and these new conversations were issues that could be brought up by younger architects. So this is where we kind of complemented each other. So we came in. I got into Pertubuhan Architect Malaysia, and I was, of course, the youngest person there. Even though I don't feel young myself, but this is pretty much the reality. Generally, 50% of registered architects are all above 50. So where are the young people? So I think that's a question I keep on asking. But then this was the start. So we needed to get people on board. We needed more importantly, not the people, but the ideas of young architects forward and to be discussed. So I think we got active. Taufiq helped a lot. I think he was kind of the right-hand guy. Maybe I think to a certain extent, probably even doing 150% more than what I was doing. So I think this is what we need. Imagine if there was 50 other people who had the same energy. And I think even with our conversations a few days ago with everyone at Concrete Matters, I think that energy, if translated into something positive, I think we could do wonders. So that's the question. Will you be there? So I think, well, that's what we want to know. So we started off with not many seats. Not many people really wanted to join in. They were very gully of Pam. Apa ni Pam ni? Gully, I don't know.
Gully,
Gully, So I think that was the impression that we wanted to break. And we started doing things. So we whatever we did, though, it needed to be informed. We just didn't go by, I think, what does it feel? What do we feel like doing that? Maybe we should watch a movie about King Bills or something. I mean, it shouldn't be like that. So we wanted to be very informed about what we did. So we took on the survey, which was done in early 2019. It gathered about 850 respondents from graduates all around Malaysia, but most of them were from the Klang Valley. And we managed to receive a host of issues ranging from registration, jobs, salary, jobs, PAM, jobs. So again, so these were the issues that came forward. And we wanted, because of the representation, as you can see in this photo, we really pushed for the, I think the graduates committee or graduates chapter to be formed. At the moment, the graduates committee is just a subcommittee under a membership and events committee, which sucks because half of registered members are actually graduates, paying graduates, and there's no representation. You're not hearing the issues that graduates want to bring forward. So it was pretty much, I think, sliced in the middle. People who supported the formation of the graduates committee, but the other half just wanted to maintain the status quo. So that's where we were at. But
sorry, do you mind elaborate more on a bit? Not quite clear. So the board that you're showing in this image
this is a council meeting in Penang. It was a special council meeting. So we went to Penang because there was a few events in Penang. But so these are the council members. So these are people that were of PAM that were elected into council, and they would create create or sort of maintain the promotion of the profession, and also changes in the constitution that affected how PAM operates. So there isn't representation of graduates in the committee, and that's what we wanted to do. So we needed to get buy-in, and of course buy-in just doesn't start overnight. It needs to start progressively. So I think there have been conversations before, but we have made strides in terms of actually getting people on board with this idea. And it wasn't just about that. It was about architects in general, and representation within government, and seeing ideas and how architects kind of sat within the whole ecosystem of Malaysia itself. It's funny because I think when we went to some of these meetings or workshops or conferences that happen, of course, when the government wants to do something, the first point of contact would be PAM for architects. So this is the position you need to be in, to be that person which they call to get any, I think,
support or funding.
Funding, or even policy, or even, I think, if you say you're about competitions or anything, this is where you need to be heard. And under the International Ministry of International Trade, we were never brought in the conversation. Why? I don't know. Probably because we weren't interested. I think we were just too busy architecting. So this is what we need to do. We need to be part of these conversations. We need to bring these issues up. We need to be articulate about our issues. We need to be strategic. So strategy plays a big part in terms of how we wanted to do things, and we need to show even all the other professionals out there that architects need to be heard, and we can help, if not only become nuisance in conversations. I think we could help the conversation and progress it further. And because of that, I think MITI actually took some of our ideas and incorporated it. So I think we're seeing progressive science. If PAM took on the ideas of its members more, was a bit more inclusive, diverse, and we were able to bring these issues forward, we could get their ear, and then actually we wouldn't be, I think, questioning as much some of their stupid decisions. It could be more smarter decisions that would benefit everyone else. So we kept this going, and I think we met ministers. This was, I think, Barubian, the previous Minister of Works. We talked about, I think, at the time, digital transformation, how it was important, and why certain strategies needed to be set for us to be globally competitive. Again, I think we continued it. We brought the issues, and of course it's coming together as a group, as a committee, finding out what issues are relevant at different levels. So where do we bring, I think, some discussions to council? How do we bring certain discussions to the government? How do we bring other conversations to different NGOs, for example, and also at an international level? And we created these events where we wanted to engage. And of course, I talked about jobs. Jobs was always an issue, and it will be a bigger issue once the moratorium ends. I think we need to find ways where we can actually talk to industry stakeholders to find better ways of or their input in terms of what do you want from graduates, and how could graduates fill in this gap and be what the market wants, or better architects in general. So that's what we did. One of the first events of its kind. I'm surprised it's never happened prior. Bringing in architectural offices. So rather than sending out 100 resumes, probably getting only one interview invite, and then settling for it, and then you're kind of stuck for the next 5 years, and then just accepting that's how architecture is like. So the idea was just to get 20 firms in, You'd go around all the 20 firms, get a quick idea of what architecture is like, and kind of like get their input. And if you're lucky, probably get an interview and continue the discussion and probably get a job. Who knows? So we developed that further. We wanted to create more engagement. We did a town hall with graduates, which was the first part of we call the bridging program. So the bridging program was about, I think, communicating the issues of younger architects, but at the same time, kind of also providing mentorship. So we get a panel of experienced architects, but not for them to kind of be that person who's like holding the whip and saying, this is what you need to do, get registered or die. No, that's not what we wanted. We wanted somebody who was embracing, tried to understand what graduates are facing and try to compare and overlap their own experiences to find similarities and to find new ways of moving forward. And of course, it's the ideas of even including technology, and I think especially in my own area, which I find we should have more conversations of. So these are things to find conversations or platforms we need to be having, so other architects know that there might not necessarily be only one route. There could be multiple routes where you can actually positively contribute back to the industry. So we kept this going. We constantly got feedback. We constantly tried to engage. But I think in general, we could be doing more. And I think it's something that it's a never-ending exercise. It needs to be done every year. So of course we update our issues, and I think we need to, and also the next committee should be doing it as well. So so it's with this sort of arrangement that we kind of know what graduates want, and I think of course it always gets updated, but there was insecurities that we needed to deal with. There's also questions that a lot of graduates wanted to know, but the answers were there but weren't communicated well. And then there was also discussions that a lot of younger architects wanted to be part of but couldn't. So one of it is, I think it's the next slide, yeah, is the Venice Biennale, which we got notice of fairly late because nobody really wanted to do it. Where are they going to get the money from? Matrade wasn't interested. They were saying, from the past Venice Biennales, the Malaysian pavilion couldn't really say how much they got in return, so a return of investment. So they just gave up. So, but it's a culturally significant event globally for architects. It's probably the premier event where you talk about architectural issues, social issues, and that affect every architect in the world, and architecture itself, and also people in general. So we wanted to be a part of it. Of course, everyone else didn't, but we decided, okay, let's just start doing it and see how far we could go. So of course, one approach would be to open it up, but then I think it would have just been too difficult with the time frame. So we just collected a small team and went forward. So I think the team consisted of Sam and Adra of Know the Scale. We brought together Iwas, who's an architect but also a musician, and also Vic, a photographer who isn't an architect. So we got somebody from the arts as well, who was experienced in exhibitions and curating art onto the team. So with this small team, we created a theme, we found ways to move forward. We opted a different strategy, not going to Ministry of Trade, but we went to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, because we thought at the time the minister wanted to really help sort of young Malaysians to be part of global discourse and give them empowerment. So we told him, this is the opportunity, this is how you would do it, and I think we got thumbs up to progress. So it was interesting. We got our meetings. We got the Ministry of Youth and Sports to become the nominators for PAM to become the official participant of the 2020 Venice Biennale. So from there, kind of took on. But of course, there's other issues that came at the time. I think COVID-19 slapped in the face, and unfortunately it got stopped. So there's no, at the moment, there's no, I think it's hard to say, although they're saying it's going to happen in 2021, but I think even talks of vaccines and everything are still up in the air, so we don't quite know. So I think it's kind of sitting there at the moment. All right, so that's it. We also, I think, one of our most recent.
Sorry, if you don't mind, go back to the Venice Finale project. May I ask if the opportunity to design or participation, was it ever promoted to open up to any other graduates to participate, or is always like an internal decision to pick who to design?
We were struggling with a very tight timeline. I think in an ideal situation, if we had started in 2018, for example, for the 2020, we probably could have opened it up. But strategically, we needed to find the mechanism for funding. We needed to find the mechanism for government support. And so the design was almost secondary.
The technical part of carrying out.
That's right. So we needed to have something for us just to take to these ministries and say, we've got something interesting, support us, and then we'll go all the way. And then the idea was for then, once we've ticked all the boxes, then we'd open up for the team and further enrich it.
I see. But why was the brief did arrive that late?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because I only entered council in 2019, middle 2019. I got the offer to kind of handle it in September.
I see.
And then we needed to get confirmation by January.
Wow.
So it was just very
1-2
tight.
months. Yeah, because I think it's a very good opportunity. It's just that it's a very good opportunity for exposure, especially for young architects. It's just that either PAN member or non-PAN member, they wouldn't have known this opportunity or like through any other channels.
That's right. So I think that's part of the message as well. I mean, these opportunities are all there. If it's not the Venice Biennale, it could be another sort of expo in Japan, for example.
Or even the World Expo design. I mean, Malaysia.
Even the World Expo, but I think we need to find ways of utilizing PAM as the formal platform to push younger architects' agenda.
Yeah.
So don't ask PAM, what is PAM going to do for me? Because they don't know. We need to find ways of utilizing PAM to do what we want. So I think if there's any takeaway, I think that's what I'm trying to push forward. So, and then we use that as well. I think there's issues about why is KL never seem like it's properly designed? How do we get the input forward? And this is where I think Taufiq and we were quite heavily involved in PAM's discussion of critiquing the KL Structure Plan 2040. So there are all these opportunities for you to get involved, for everyone to get involved. It's just finding the right avenue. But at the same time, it's also strategizing the way for us to have a really consolidated, strong voice. If not, if it's just individuals all over the place, you'll always be seen as fragmented individuals rather than as a strong unit. I think Malaysians are generally coming together. We've got a lot of ideas. We're a talented, smart bunch. We just need to find like-mindedness, similar ideologies, and push that forward. So I think I came to the end of my term. I'm looking to hand it over. But of course, the process, and I think the pursuit has to be continued. For me, I think I've done as much as I can in PAM. I just wanted to show that it could be done. And I think, of course, I'm entering my 40s next year. It would be really good. It would be really, really good if we can get younger architects in and have greater numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's my intro. Sorry it took a bit long, but it was really a long story.
Woo!
Great.
Great. Thank you guys. This is the end of Concrete Matter sharing. Yeah, because I think there was a very great introduction and basically covered most of the things, almost everything. Yeah, before we even talk about the conversation yet. Yeah, but thank you, Sufyan, for the very thorough explanation of everything. I think we do have some questions, and then we will probably bring up in the following conversation. So
Sure.
Yep. Let me continue my sharing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's dive into the memorandum as shared by Sufyan earlier, and perhaps we can discuss more in depth in a particular few issues. So, actually just prepare a bit of introduction as well. So if it still seems relevant, maybe I'll just quickly glance through. So as part of the introduction, I actually pull up the material shared by Taufiq earlier. It was this letter from A.R. Naslan to our Prime Minister, Mr. Najib, that in 2011 highlighting that some of the statistics that some might not know. So, like for example, the ratio of architect to population in different countries. And in Malaysia, in 2011, the numbers is 1 to 16,000 populations. So this is actually a very drastically different if you were to compare to UK, Hong Kong, Australia, or New Zealand. And of course, that we do have other nations who are doing poorer, such as India or Japan or Bangladesh, which is 1 architect to 62,000 population. But then looking at these numbers, it's actually not hard to imagine that how low is the passing rate. And then there's another paper from FF Studio of Design Research Thinking Architecture saying, comparing that the number of architect and engineer is actually lesser than the orangutan in Sabah and Sarawak. So yeah. So another statistics also show that the passing rates of architect to another profession in Malaysia, such as doctors, lawyers, engineers, and accountants, they are ranging at least 20% and above, whereas ours is 20% and below. So are we saying that architects is harder to become an architect than other profession, you see? So moving forward, some of the survey has shown earlier by Mr. Sufyan on the annual graduate survey. Just want to highlight that out of the 573 respondents, almost more than 80%, 90% actually interested to be a registered architect. But I think the conclusion arrived is as the age group increases, the interest to continue learn part 3 within the age pool decrease. It seems that the longer you're in the profession, the least interest you become to continue the journey as part 3. And And I think most of the council member, the one that is in PAM, like you said earlier, they are above 50 years old. I think most of them, they are registered architect already. So they kind of put a very small portion of the people who are like on the pedestal, in the sense that they got past the exam and then they are in the council member. Whereas a lot of graduate architects out there, whether they are unaware or they're very hard to get past the exam or even be in the council itself. Yeah. So these are some of the questions gotten from the survey form, not survey form, sorry, the registration form that I have on the Concrete Matter page. So some of them actually ask like, how important is a certificate nowadays? I've met so many practicing designer who doesn't even finish school and they can design. So do we actually need the certificate right now? Do we need PAM 3, the registration? And is part 1, 2, and 3 still legit in Malaysia? And how do we empower professions? And what are the things, to really become an architect? Do you need to be registered? Yeah, so hopefully we can have an answer. Even we don't, hopefully some of the answer can spark further exploration. Yeah.
I think just to start off, maybe I think the route to licensure is important, because we live in a civil society. We need to abide by rules and certain standards, so we protect the public. That's it. So basically from there, I think then we start to question, how do we create this framework which defines someone who is an architect? So I think at the moment there's only one route to be called an architect, or AR or whatsoever is that route to part 3. So I think this is where I think the frustration might lie, because as we can see, I think from a lot of architects, there's many ways of learning architecture. There's many other different ways of practicing architecture, but there seems to be only one way of becoming an architect. So I think that's the bigger question. That's the bigger question. So is that architect or the part 3 architect someone who you want to be? So when you first start off, as you can see within that survey as well, a lot of people, yes, they say they want to be an architect, but when they do find out what being a part 3 architect is about, they might decide otherwise, or to continue the route, which is not wrong. To a certain extent, is what you should be doing, to just understand what the industry is about. But at the same time, for us to progress as a society, for us to progress as a knowledge-based nation, we need to find ways where we grow our professionals and our professional architects. And at the moment, I think what people are questioning is the current system providing that? So I think that's what we need to be questioning. And it shouldn't be something that's seen as sort of a threat to current architects. It should be something that is embraced to strengthen the profession by inviting different ways of doing architecture, but also finding new architects that actually enrich, I think, the profession. Because one, if you go back even the last 20 years, the number of architects hasn't changed. It's just sat at 2,000. Whereas we're producing public architecture schools are pumping out 500 graduates every year. And that's not including private schools, and it's not including students who go abroad and come back. So it's probably in the thousands every year. So how come that number isn't rising? And at the same time, we're seeing architects
producing every year.
Yeah, produced every year. Where are they going? Where are they going? Are they suddenly disappearing? I mean, I don't know, but some of my friends, they turn into insurance agents. They start I don't know, selling apa ubat muda or something. But then, so this is a loss to the industry. You go and invest 6 to 7 years, and then suddenly these people kind of just disappear. Whereas these are people who, like I said, architects are optimists by nature. They are passionate, and they're very knowledgeable, especially for you to get to that 7 years and graduate. But so how would you just let them go fairly easily?
I see.
What do you think, Toph?
Yeah, I think regarding practice and designers, I mean, this is the first question, right? How important is certificate nowadays? It's a matter of, I think, understanding what does a registered architect entails, you know? And sometimes, you know, this first question regarding the industry, one is to be specific, you know, like what sort of activity is one actually doing in the industry? So the architecture industry is actually defined as under AES, or Architecture Engineering Services, you know, under the National Economic definition. And I think when you talk about somebody getting a Part 3 certification, which also entails being qualified as, you know, passing Part 1 and Part 2 requirements before sitting for the Part 3 exam, it also means that you are heading into an area where you will be looking at implementation and contract administration. So that should be sort of like a very loose definition of what it means. And the registered architecture means it's a chartered practice. So when we are talking about this last statement, they can design, and times are changing now. So I think the question here is, how about the definition of practice architecture activities that are beyond the definition of architecture and engineering services? So this is, again, I think the problem that we face when we were actually pushing for the Venice Biennale paperwork, that we actually had to go to 3 ministries. The first ministry we went through was Cendana, because they are the guardian ministry for creative economy. And then later we went to MITI, which was the mother of, you know, ministry for and Matrade for trade activities, generally for exporting architecture and engineering services. We didn't go to KKR, Kementerian Kerja Raya, because they were looking at legislation of architecture services within the jurisdiction of being a chartered practitioner, you know, which is under construction and all the legalities. And then we finally actually went to the Ministry of Youth, because we also, you know, due to the fact that we thought the constituency of those having a common issue with this problem were generally those who were young, you know, 40 and below. Because generally, if you look at the survey, the main bulk of graduate architects being interested in doing their Part 3 examination are those who are 40 and below, and then it starts to taper down after that. I ignore my brother-in-law. So yeah, so I think that's looking at in terms of definition. So the future of services of architecture, I think, is that beyond the conventional architecture services, also includes other form of added value services, which might include research, it might include design, curatorial services. So if you look at all these activities, what needs to be important is to understand how do they stream within the National Economic Plan. So you have to understand, if you are sort of in academia, it falls under research and education, although it is actually research and architecture. It doesn't fall under architecture and engineering and, you know, architecture and engineering services, because those are, you know, architecture construction services. So, you know, when you reach the policy level, you realize that there hasn't been a lot of research or paper that's written to even define and to support the policies that, you know, today when we talked about, times are changing. So I think when you're at sort of just graduating or in uni, you should start with the notion that times are changing. But I think the problem is, I think for so many years, our institution hasn't been doing or putting sufficient resource or conversation and also emphasis and to lobby the issue of future form of practices. I think this is quite. I think if we look at as Singapore, we look at Australia, we look at.
We're stuck.
He's lagging on his side. Okay.
So maybe just to add there, I think he's talking about.
Actually do have a question, but this is related to what he was saying. As in, like,
Yeah.
Oh, hi. You're right.
You're back.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm frozen. So if you look at all the other countries, they have a research and also like a future economy ministries, that actually look into this. So the discussion shouldn't actually rely on young people. It should actually also be with vision and foresight by our strategic literature. So I think me and Pian, I think everyone here needs to understand that we are actually exiting the graduate category a lot because we're already in practice. Pian does a lot of his practice is now looking at architecture technologies, whereas for me, my formal practice is more in urban tech. So I'm looking at different form of cross-disciplinary practice. So we represent, I think, in terms of the voice, and I think a lot of the thinkers here like Nazmi and even Kawa is emerging, looking at sort of representing industry players. But I think there is a lot. I think in the past, like this conversation and also push further up, to the ministry level. There isn't enough that combustible of like advocacy to look at what issues do we have as young startup or young companies, and going into sort of maturing sort of the ones that are in the 5-7 year age of companies, like what sort of issues do we have in terms of in the trade area of practice, and where do we want to basically ask for this advocacy of our trade issues. So I think for me the more important thing is when Farah and Sudhikanta mentioned times are changing now. I think the question is, what is the new manifesto for a graduate economy? I think that's a very important question to ask. I do think part 1, part 2, part 3 is very legit in Malaysia when it comes to the conventional practices. But I'm not going to comment much about the appetite or the direction of future forms of practice. I think there's a lot of, we can talk about that later because there's a lot of issues with that.
Because when you mentioned about some of the non-conventional cross multidiscipline kind of practices, I mean that doesn't require registration. How ready is the graduate, and also how ready is the society going to accept this kind of practices, you see? As in, like, if I'm a client, if I'm a client and then I got a designer, he has a very good resume, very good portfolio, but he is not a registered architect. Can this client trust us, or this kind of?
I mean, can I take that one?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you mean as finding a job or finding a project?
Finding maybe projects. Yeah.
Well, I think I think a lot of people like to sort of hypothesize a problem, unless it's like a real problem faced. Like I think for a business, for you to, that's a business problem. How do you get your client to have a higher sense of validation of your reliability and also your competency? I think for small practices or even practices that without like build projects, I think obviously it's through their portfolio, showing content. But I think there are other forms of I think the the issue is actually addressing risks. So there are sometimes when some, small companies or niche or added value companies, they partner up with larger companies or registered companies. So this actually allays the factor of risk, whether it's actually about competency, or is it legal framework, or is it actually about reliability. So those are one way to actually address the problem when it relates to that. But I think fundamentally in the first position is if you can get a project, I think that's the main thing. So it's more of like a networking and a business
Not
skill.
necessary is the registration problem.
Yeah, I mean it hinders because it's like a chicken and egg, right? Do you get the project first, or are you registered? Can you get the project? That's the thing. Not to say I'm skeptical. I'm saying that it should be on a sort of hypothesis question. It should be on a sort of like real base problem. And I think a lot of people, if you get like a small scope job, probably just the first design stage, I think it's quite straightforward. I think there, I don't know. So this has to come from people whether it is actually a problem. If you think you cannot get the design projects because you're not registered, but that's like hypothesize again. Yeah. So you get what I mean. So I always like to look at the problem and think, is this like a real problem, or is it a hypothesized problem? Yeah. But I do know there is a problem with not being able to register because you can't provide the full scope of service as a young or a startup, so that's quite real.
Yeah. But I just wanted to add to that, like especially nowadays, projects are getting to be a lot more complex and specialized. Having said that, I think there's an expectation that as a specialist or a knowledgeable person, you're supposed to know everything. So we live in a day and age where even portions of a project would be highly complex and requires certain niche knowledge. And I think this is where I think the registration process would probably need to go. So you're looking at a limited liability because, for example, I think it's kind of progressing in that way now, especially with architectural technologists. It's breaking it down into different specialities. For example, facade design. You can actually be registered under a lembaga or the board as a facade specialist. And that might be all you want to do. And you're satisfied doing it. You're very good at it. You're knowledgeable, and you can be registered under that. Or you can be a BIM sort of specialist, which is kind of what we do as well. And I think I've registered under that as well. But there isn't a large pool of people to actually create more policies or framework behind it to inform the government. So that's the next step. Like, once you are certified, what do you do with it?
Yeah, I think this is something that like myself and PN can share a bit. Like, it's what we faced in our work, because how do you do something that people don't do yet? Like, you're the first. Like, what do you even call that? In the contract. So if it's even hard to sort of to term it as a service. For example, if I'm doing I'm saying I'm doing a strategic development master plan. You get what I mean? It's so random. And then I'm saying, I'm doing urban tech, So this is really preceding. So I think the good thing is, I think a lot of young architects, I think when they graduate, they're actually, in fact, they're innovators in the different fields. It could be academia, it could be practice, it could be urban. And unfortunately, I think we are in a sort of a very informal economy, outside of the architecture and engineering services, which means that we don't have the framework like how the industry structure has already been set up. Let's say in the States, or in the UK, or even in Australia or in Singapore, where there's a clear definition of what these services are, where they should go, what are the liabilities, the legalities, and what are the support. And with policy, what's important about policy is that policy also allows you a lot of support, like tax breaks. It allows you resources. It allows you maybe to get support and to be heard out by a ministry or an agency if you have a problem. So it's quite hard when you are everything that is, young, new, and unheard of, So that's the weight for a lot of, I think we're reaching our 40s, right? We realize that we don't just have to support our company growth and think about that. And we were also starting to think about the policy, to go see the government. And that takes a lot of our time.
Yeah, so that's a good transition. I think we're talking about the framework to be an architect, but let's say you spend all those years and you decide to be an architect, thinking that once you do get your Part 3, suddenly things fall into place and you'll get people come to you and get jobs, and the government will be paying you, and your clients will be paying you decent money just after you've completed that process. But in reality, that's not the case.
No.
We need the system to actually re-inform that process of us becoming that architect. So it should be a back and forth process. And I think that's what isn't happening. Now, so now we need to question, why isn't that happening? Aren't we as a society asking the right questions? Or are we sort of handicapped in a way where we're used to standards and codes for us to progress to different levels? Can't we think for ourselves? Do we need guidelines every single way? Or are we void of common sense? So these are things that I think goes back to education. And I think compared to the first memorandum, which is just talking about registration, not enough architects, I think we're posing a bigger question. So registration is one of the issues. Education is the next. I mean, we are in a global society. What is the form of education that we should be introducing the next generation of architects and also just thinkers in general? So I think this is where we kind of want that to be informing the registration numbers as well. It's not just about getting more architects. Like we want quality architects with those numbers as well. And those numbers should actually come from an education that knows how to ask the right questions, promote the right policies, and then create a solid framework that supports producing these architects. So, and I think that is why we're asking these questions. So at the moment, the current education system is set up is very handicapped. I think we have to kind of go through a system where we're kind of waiting 5 to 6 years before we even get our master's. So this only happened in the last 5 years. Before that, I think you only got your bachelor's degree after 6 years. And people were already graduating at the age of 22, 23, going in a senior exec position, and then you're questioning your family's investment. Now these are real,
your investment.
So these are real issues that I think affect you down the line. Although a lot of architects kind of say, "Don't worry lah, take your time lah, you'll get there lah." But money doesn't grow on trees, and I think everybody needs to survive. And we're going into this period where, and I think we're looking at a global financial crisis, and jobs kind of disappearing. So how do we prepare for that and make sure that doesn't happen to us? So, and I think now the question is, so if we pass Part 3, are we going to solve those problems?
Yeah.
Probably not. So I think
I mean,
this
That
is where
that actually actually brings.
that's the other part of the richness of the conversations, isn't it? Like,
I
Yeah.
I
think
think
there's
we're
one interesting question. Sorry to butt in. From Amos saying that isn't like one of the main biggest issues of the profession would be the low work to pay off.
I
Then
know. Okay. Yeah. So I want
well,
to. I saw that
yeah,
question, but
yeah. I saw that question
I
too.
wanted
Yeah,
to get to this topic first
yeah.
because it actually relates back to that. Now, and I think Toph and I kind of understand. We've been talking about it a lot. And I
yeah,
think once we're talking about a knowledgeable, informed society, it is at the end of the day pushing towards better values.
Yeah.
So values are, they can be monetary, but they can also be also a social sort of values that we push forward. And these values, we're talking about being a high value nation. Once we talk about high value nation, once you value the knowledge that is out there, then you would be paying for it. At the moment, we are a nation that values everything to be produced very cheaply. Anything. We
True.
want discounts. We want buy one, get three. We want everything to be done tomorrow, and we're not valuing the craft behind it. So I
Yeah.
think if we as a society cannot gauge the value of something, or we value it differently,
That's,
how are we going
that's
to
think.
value salary?
Amos, you want to add something to it?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Amos.
Oh
Yeah,
crap! Sorry. I thought the whole time I was muted. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I saw it that you actually, you did point it out in issue 2.
yeah, yeah. So it is there.
Yeah,
I
I
think
see it that.
so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as sorry. Yeah. As you
Was
said
it
that
this
it puts
page?
us at the back of the race, so to speak, right? I
it puts
believe.
us at the back of the race. So
Yep.
we are always trying to catch up. But at the
yeah,
same time, other things happen. You need to get that new Samsung 20, or your second child is going to be born, and you're always playing catch up, and it's not fair. But at the same time, we also appreciate that to gain this knowledge takes time. The craft of architecture takes time. But to be rewarded in that way, you need to have people around you that see
appreciate.
value in what you do. So I think this is where education, talking to people, engagement, activism is very important. You need to show at the same time. I mean, it's not enough saying, "Yelah, because we're good designers, you need to pay us lah." And if not, don't have design. What does design even mean? We need to figure out a way for design to be not only qualitative but quantifiable. How can you say a design is worth a certain amount? We need to make it comprehensible, or even to a certain extent legible for the layperson to understand. If not, you're expecting everyone to be architects, which can never happen. So I think creating the value in the society is very important. These values are at the moment just very qualitative. I feel we need to make it a bit more quantifiable.
I think
yeah. I think you're right. Sorry, I need to add into that.
Yeah.
I think when we were specifically talking about education, right? We're looking at the cost of investment of, if you're doing academically abroad, if it's not architectural, if you've done 2.5 years, you get a bachelor's degree, right? And if you did 5 years, you get a master's. You do 7, you get into a MPhil or almost a PhD. I think this is the whole point. The value of the architecture, cost structure, physically itself, that's something to look into. But we're saying this not to sort of also attack the level of the civic value of society. I think that problem falls within this whole idea of what is the identity of the Malaysian, people as one, as a whole, when it comes to being participative, the debate, high thoughts, so those are humanities values. So it is to say, you know, like it's a bit elitist to say that architecture is the course where you learn all these humanities, you know, elements. It should be actually across the board. So I think if we navigate the course of architecture and quite understand in the context of today, now moving into the form and the content of architecture, we do know that in practice today, architecture is not, it's still mainly conservative, but it starts to veer into the future. So why can't we adapt the architecture, you know, like programs and way of learning to sort of immediately go into all this specialization, so that, you know, now we're even talking about learning through like TVET and also industry intern attachment. You know, why do you have to really be so, you know, like learn rigidly in school? So this threads of conversation is sort of very current, but I think if we sort of try to locate this conversation like here, you know, in our country, it doesn't happen. So again, it is, I guess, you know, that debate, that public debate culture is not there, that participation is not there, that thought of, you know, like being so and then we look at who are the roles of, you know, um, who plays the role of actually asking these questions and to push them. How do you push them? I think these are the questions that we need to ask. Not to say that we have the answer, but we are asking these questions, you know, along with you guys. And actually, with Pian, we also actually raised this issue with MITI and also another agency, which is the Malaysian Productivity Corporation, MPC. And MPC is a productivity agency that looks at removing any sort of obstacle towards progress or productivity. They produce the Malaysian Productivity Blueprint. So they address, I think, four main themes of change or improvement, which is on industry structure, industry environment, talent, and also one more is technology, you know, adaptation. So understanding that when we were there, we mentioned that if you're looking at under the guise of human resource, right, it's the main criticism was that a lot of Malaysian graduates are not fitted to the industry requirement. So again, you know, I'm not reducing the issue of education as a humanities, you know, to have this humanities values, but again, you know, like we were raising these issues, and I think the fact that the participation, bureaucratic participation, or representative bureaucracy, because there weren't enough young people or people who were executives and professional who were in there to illustrate. But then beyond illustrating and even identifying, if you're only one or two youngsters, you know, in a sea of people who are in their 50s and 60s, who, you know, they have their values and they are generally think those are the main priority issues, then these issues of change, of institutional reform, of, you know, thinking of changing of vision and mindset is not going to happen. So we need to have more people in, you know, at all levels, from grassroots, students, graduates, all the researchers, you know, to basically push up, you know, articulate your issues, understand its alignment in the sort of a national framework. And if it's not there, you know, create your path, you know, write that white paper and, you know, talk about all these issues. I think this is where I think when it comes to education, I think that was sort of what was endeared within our memorandum when we drafted it under issue 2. Yeah, I think that's all I can say. There's this question by Phil as well for teachers.
Yeah, before that, Yvonne, you want to add anything? You were saying earlier.
Yeah.
No, I just want to say I totally agree with what Sufyan and Taufiq is saying. Like the mentality of the Malaysian society, civic society, they are not aware of what architects are doing. That's why they take our work for granted and, you know, expect us to design cheaply.
Yeah.
But you see, it's not a philosophy. It's really a value. You know, it's a culture. So we keep thinking it's a philosophy, but the fact is that it's people act on it. So it's a value. So we need to change how, you know, our culture, how we interact with one another, how we have esteem for young people, for older people. So, it is about where is this culture of excellent, innovative Malaysians? That's the question that we always ask.
I wonder if the
Culture.
same thing applies to, as I say, other profession. Like we won't doubt doctors, or we won't doubt
Yes.
engineers, we won't doubt
Bottom
lawyers.
line,
But
Okay,
the
why?
I just
MPC,
wanted to add to that
yeah.
point. I mean, because it's very straightforward and it's very comprehensible.
But is
Because it's
architecture not straightforward? Is building not gonna cost
No.
danger to life? As
building
in-
is not straightforward. How do you put a value of design? How do you quantify that? So I think that's the
but
question.
to some certain extent, building is not just design. I mean, there is a lot of aspect that is quite straightforward, and then they should value us for putting the fire safety into a proper place or something like that.
I think you
Yes,
mean
but
Joey. Sorry, you go ahead. Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
I think this relates to kind of like the scale of minimum fees, where you're
I
saying
see.
that's the basic services. But if you were to look at the scale of minimum fees, it's very vague. It's not specific enough. So let's say a client goes to you, okay, I just want you to do schematic design. What is in the scale of minimum fees that outline the
Yeah.
the actual works that you do? It's very vague. And some clients just say, "Oh, I just want a 20% discount. I don't care lah what you do." But you should be able to say, if you want to deduct 20%, these are the services that you won't get. So you won't get your fire calculation. You won't get your nice facade. You won't get a light slab to use, or better engineering. But we need to make that a bit more quantifiable. At the moment, it's just feasibility design. What does that mean?
Yeah. I think we also, if we refer to the PAM crisis paper 2013, right? When we talk about value, we talk about value of the industry economic activity. For example, within the entire 5 years of Malaysians economic value of the economic activity in construction, for example, how many percent actually of the income came from what sort of economic activity? So in construction, for example, a local submitting firm, right, for a large project. So although the fee is bigger, it's actually work intensive. So when it comes to the fee value, you're actually doing low value work. So the high value work are actually all the additional services. So these are things such as research, design,
which is innovation.
Yeah, innovation. Anything that's to do with innovation. So relating back, number one, first to Joyee regarding it's simple. I think the best way to I see it is that it's more saying that it's the values or the definition of the services are quite clear, and I think Pian is trying to say that in terms of you can sort of gauge it from the fees of saying if you adapt it to fee structure, you can go with the value. But then I want to point out the issue with the industry, our economy, and also the value for money. For example, a construction cost for a building in KL because I've done a lot of high-rise building. I'm seeing it because of Singapore's currency, they are in a better position to actually be able to afford better building technology. So again, like the economic value, that's a level of affordability. But then also in terms of can we afford additional sort of emphasis on innovation within our every single building type? Then we look at where the job comes from. A lot of our building construction project comes from the government. So if the government doesn't actually push towards championing technology, smart urban tech, green smart cities, sustainable design, it's not going to be able to also create to basically buffer and create this green economy or high creative economy. So it has to actually start also from the top, because if the job don't exist, then the specialists can't do the work.
That's
So
right.
I will tell you one thing. I'll share with you. When I came back in 2011 and 12, I wanted to do urban research in the practice, and I think it went to an apologetic sort of accident of creating a design department. But I think it's only when I quit in 2016. It's not because I quit the company, but because that's when the country, in terms of economy, was starting to do a lot of value research in design and mega projects, right? So that's when there were actually jobs and people like myself to actually come forward and do research and all this additional value work in urban strategy. So it's also the economic context and the environment. And if you look at it from that part, you do need to actually have a bit of an economist strategy, to sort of look at that. And I think when we look at the PAM graduate survey, and also the PAM crisis 2013, in fact, actually a lot of people who were surveyed, they were actually number one, large companies pay the highest salaries for graduates. And two, most graduates are actually quite paid well, from the survey. So, where is actually the crisis there when it comes to pay? I think there was another question about those who were preferring to stay abroad, right? Upon graduation. I'm not sure if that actually relates to salary per se, because I do know some people mentioned about it was more about the environment and the peer and the industry support, So this is something that I think
the working culture, perhaps.
Yeah, the culture, the peer support, the industry environment. Working culture is industry environment, and this is something that I think. What's that? The Malaysian talent that brings the diaspora back. I think they know this issue.
Talent Corp. Yeah.
Talent Corp. Yeah. So and I have friends, that I know. That's why most of them they choose to live abroad for environment, for like lifestyle choices. So again, when we actually study and look at the issues, what are the issues of those who are in the diaspora? That's like a separate trajectory, versus the practice and economic issues of those who are actually practicing at home. And you have to further slot in between those who are graduates, are graduating from school, versus those running a company, and versus those working in a practice, So the issues are quite diverse economically.
Okay. I see there is some interesting discussion going on in the group chat. And Taufiq, you were saying earlier you want to share something about educators in architecture education, is it?
What was the question? Or maybe the person wants to turn the mic on and just ask again and frame the question. Because I lost the
Was it Phil?
Was it Phil?
Yeah, I just lost the text. Yeah.
Is
Can
Phil
we post
online?
the question?
Can we?
I can copy the question.
Is Phil online?
Sure.
It'd be great. That you want to share?
So he said that he wanted to share his thought as a lecturer. So education is just place for student or learner learn from mistake, practicing critical thinking and a good profession practices. It's hardly to tell you are good or bad. As usual, design is very subjective. I have few students are willing to learn beyond their ability, but majority just want to pass and graduate and get a certification, get a job and good pay, not aware of how complex it is when you enter the industry, and even though they have gone through internships. So my question is, how should I do as a lecturer to educate them to be part of being aware as being a designer should be registered? Yeah.
I think that goes back to the issue of values. I think when you want to define high value, it's also sort of culturally lifting yourself to a different level as well. I think if it's just about passing asal boleh, you're not creating a culture of excellence. So a culture of excellence means I think to go beyond, to make sure that you are value adding whatever it is that is being presented to you. And I think if if there isn't, if you don't value that in its basic form, how do you expect, I think, I think how do you expect education to kind of provide anything more? So I think it's a hard one for educators as well, and I think
Mm.
you're kind of seeing that with a lot of I've seen that especially kind of in kind of my crits where I kind of see them just doing the basics, just getting, okay, you've
Mm.
done your sun
Floor
analysis, you've done
plan.
your precedent study, and it doesn't correlate in whatever manner, but it's enough to get you to get you by. So I think it goes back to that culture and attitude of actually doing more and making sure, I think, you're providing excellence. Only then, if
Mm.
you do it, the next person next to you does it as well, and it's infectious. So I mean, personally, I believe stop thinking about getting the government to change everybody. I think you have to change yourself, and you affect with the people within arm's reach, and those people will affect their closest people within arm's reach, and that will start
Mm.
to get things moving. But you need to start with yourself.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think for that question, I would like to actually look at make a state. I mean, based on like my understanding of where the role of schools in the future. I think it's actually transitioning now. Universities, are actually going to be the place of collaborative research. So I think that should be quite an empowering thing, because even in the economy of research and design, as in like oil and gas and also pharmaceuticals, already a lot of companies, they don't actually do their own research. They actually, they put their money or capital into universities, and they actually drive the innovation and research. And university, I think, from the intellectual property sort of economic activity, drive. I think they transform the research into something that the industry can utilize. I think the reason so is because that R&D is not a profit method of profit-oriented or profit-guaranteed activity. For example, in a company that's small, medium, or large, operations through replication ensures you a certain degree of profit. So this is, and like that's the formula. But for research, unfortunately, you don't know. Like every time you do an action, it's 50% success or 50% failure.
Yeah.
So the outcome of research generally is that you get a lesson of success or a lesson of failure. And I think if you look at, I've seen a lot of my friends who are doing research. They have grants, not just like academic research, but applied science research. Like chemists and also physicists. And so if this is the way how it goes, I think schools and universities must look at themselves, differently than just to be a place of reading books, but more about, you know, teaching how young graduates to be leaders of innovation if they want to, because it's not for everyone as well. So again, understanding the different, types of graduates that will come out. I think we live in a time of specialization, and we live in a time of resource. So how is the university going to look at the students beyond just one identity? So I think learning and the curriculum must also be adaptive to allow specialization. And also I think setting up of investment into research facilities and resources, and this is to happen beyond just in master's level, but into research and PhD, make it more applied and industry relevant. I think collaboration with industry researchers and industry leaders, practice leaders. Yeah, so eventually it will go there. So I think if you're talking about student awareness, prematurely, I guess they should spend an immediate time with the industry. You know, I think there's a lot of conversation talking about a learning that's based on industry attachment. So the
Apprenticeship.
best way to know, the best experience and awareness to give them is to give them an industry attachment. You know what you want or you don't want, and you grow in the industry.
Yeah.
But on the matter of design, so the question about that will be, what sort of career or role in the future economy if you do learn design? And I think when you talk about design, are you talking about theory? Are you talking about aesthetic? Are you talking about philosophy? So I mean, all these things, humanities and human touch, high touch, history, have a very important role in the future. It informs everything. So it doesn't mean that it is against technology or against profession or industry. And I think I wrote a few keywords here. Student upon graduation, I actually feel quite sorry for the graduates for this year and next year, especially because I mean, we know in the construction industry from 2017, even before PRU 14, that the construction industry is slowing down. I think that's why because of there's not much analysis in architecture and engineering services on the state of economy. It has failed to advise like the production of architects as like in the ACS. But I might be sort of like I might be short for saying that, but we all know there's a lack of construction projects. People say it's starting to kick up, but I think we're economically we're moving into an era where we're gonna be doing lesser construction, lesser mega projects. We're gonna have access to lesser capital in the world. Dubai was a lesson in real estate capital, and then we still look at Kuala Lumpur, and even Kuala Lumpur is struggling with the excess supply of real estate spaces, all the property hang-ups. And then how are we going to deal with all this new real estate that was supposed to come out in, all the white elephants in the entire, like peninsula, for example, in Malacca, in Johor, and now in Penang. So it's all happening concurrently. I think the idea is that do you match is there like an awareness of graduation to available jobs, and unfortunately like COVID also shows that an environmental impact has slowed our country's economic trajectory. So we'll be looking more towards jobs that are in added value in future. But if you are in a sort of developed economy where these jobs, and the industry sector is available, you can just go into, like green economy, you can go into creative economy, you can go into the smart economy, digital economy. But as we know, the IR 4.0, right, Pian? The REWDP, I don't know what they call it. So it's not even, it's not even established,
They're saying we're still at IR 2.5. So how do you get into a job with IR 4.0 if we're still IR 2.5? I mean, I guess that's just a joke, but I guess generally you're looking at smaller projects, but there's the opportunity of making it higher value. So how do you make it higher value? So I think these are the questions that new graduates need to ask themselves. What are they offering, or what are the skills required for them to look at these smaller projects, but potentially offering or people spending more to make it better? Because I think I think COVID, as much as it is sort of slowing down the construction industry and many other affected industries, but at the same time is giving us a time to think of ways of doing things. So
I think just to recap, just the last 2 points, short ones. So student upon graduation, my advice is, I think you have to really understand where you are and what's available in the industry. Understand what sort of qualification and skill an architectural degree or master's provide for you, and see where are the job openings. For association, I think maybe more dialogue between academia, and academia with industry, to figure out, identities and, collaboration work. For students, perhaps there should be a student league that focuses on, jobs. Yeah.
I see. Sorry, earlier I wanted to say like the COVID and the economic thing, I think is kind of related to issue number 3. I do have to, sorry to not jump into restructure a bit so that we stay on track on the
Sure,
topic.
yeah. Go for it.
I think it's interesting, like, because we are like jumping around places talking because it's related. But so we do have some question over here as shown on the screen related to issue number 2. So perhaps we can go through this and then we go to issue number 3, which is related to economy, and issue number 4 is regarding the youth representative other organization. So due to time constraint, we still can go through this question. It's 10. That's good. So Yvonne or Gary, do you guys want to elaborate on the question?
No, I hope people are still interested. We're just not
sorry guys.
I see the group chat is live. Guys, you can speak up. No. Yvonne?
Okay. First question would be, I think this whole session will be related to what Alif Daniel asked previously. So why graduates prefer to start their careers abroad and not locally, indirectly causing a huge brain drain? But I think this already covered, because you were saying it might be the working peers and stuff. And then what kind of reforms do we need in Malaysian architectural education? And also number 3 is kind of related, because recently there was a Twitter poll by the Rotan Project. This account posted a question: what are the factors holding back architectural exploration in Malaysian architecture schools? 65% said LAM, 20% said lecturers' limited knowledge, 10% said the school environment and facilities, while only 5% said it's the students' lack of initiative or unwillingness to explore. So based on this poll, what do you think we should do to lobby for a better curriculum, or more specifically, how do we approach LAM?
I think the first thing to do is just to stop blaming people. I think that's what we need to be doing. We just need to point it back to ourselves and just say, now we've been dealt with these cards. What can we do with it? I mean, of course, LAM is currently the main body, sort of umbrellaing the whole profession. But I think what can we do to inform LAM? So I think through writing, through discourse, through having more engagements, I think that's the first step. I think the other one is looking at this parallel learning, where you are closely more related to the industry. So this has been done in Australia, I think, towards I think the closer end of my years over there, where we started actually getting final year students within the office. So they were designing their own projects, but within an office environment. So they weren't necessarily burdening the office to kind of give them projects. They were just doing their own thing, but within an office environment. So from there, there would be this sort of coincidental learning as well. So you'd see how an office works. What are the key people that are valued? What types of values are there within an office environment that are appreciated? And that eases you into the working environment. So it's kind of hard. I've posed this question to academics as well, where it's very rigid. No, you have to be in a studio which is located on a campus which is registered under MQA, etc. So then it becomes very hard for you, especially in the Klang Valley, where technically you can learn from anywhere. I mean, all the architectural offices are here, and all the big schools are in and around the area. Why isn't there more cross-academia industry collaboration? So for example, if I were to say, I'm going to take up a studio, But the studio has to be run in my office, because then it would be easier for me to deal the day-to-day stuff rather than sort of traveling and going through jams just to go through there and losing a day of work. But then at the same time, not only the students can learn within the environment of my office, but at the same time they can also talk to people, see what projects are happening, and also that is a way of kind of already being exposed to the real environment. So I think that's not what's being done enough. It's very too theoretical to a certain extent, which I still value. But at the same time, I think if we're talking about creating new types of values and really putting it where you want it, so you're saying, okay, I need a good salary. So to get a good salary, the employers have to say, this is what I want from you. So it's just that learning between the two, make it a bit more quicker and seamless.
How about you, Taufiq? You have anything to add on?
I think first question about brain drain. To be honest, the problem with Malaysia's talent is, if you look at a value, right? If you value up, your salary actually increases with your specialization and your skill. I would like to say that in a sort of like a forward and innovative company, generally they would actually allow, in some practices, for example, like maybe companies that does PMC. So you're sort of sent for training. So as you sort of go forward and get all these certificates, it could be a skill, or it could be like a methods of work or systems, and so your salary increases. The problem here is that what do you do with when you cannot progress in your career? So I think in Malaysia, the main crux of brain drain from local mid-value, I would say mid-value to high-value talent is that the company cannot afford them because the company don't have the high-value jobs, simply to say. They can afford to hire and pay and keep low value to middle value. Low value doesn't mean a derogatory thing. It just means that it's somebody who is from a starting level of work. So this is when I think a lot of major companies around the world, they love hiring Malaysians for that. And I think this is actually the main crux of the issue with Talent Corp. And I think most of us who studied abroad, we have mentioned this time and time again, like you have to address it. I got friends who, are nuclear scientists and they couldn't, work here. So, and then a lot of researchers as well, so they don't come back. Generally, maybe their specialization, is not available here. And that's causing the brain drain economically. Kind of reforms we need in Malaysian architecture education. I think we mentioned a lot, right?
Yeah,
about the form,
earlier.
the structure.
Correct.
Yeah, I think the Twitter poll here, if we're saying about architecture exploration and LAM, it's quite tough. I have no comment on this because I feel I think as a student it's really hard. I think I would say you have to try to look for the school that suits you best. I think if you're looking for a specialization. Unfortunately, I think sometimes this can be quite limiting for a lot of people. I just share a bit, like for me when I didn't want to do my part 2 in ITM Shah Alam because I think I did like 5 years there in my undergraduate. So I checked out NUS, I checked out all the other unis, I even applied to Rhode Island, So at the end of the day, I chose what I chose, generally because that was the specialization I thought, and it was within my budget. So talking about this, it's generally is architecture exploration again. It depends on the school specialization. Again, I think we talk about where design is in the future, right? So I think as long as on the school side, there's a clear understanding of that, I think you get graduates that could at least be able to work using their qualification when they graduate. I think that's most important. Yeah, even if it's design exploration.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on this I think the statement made by Nicholas. So how many generations does it take to achieve these set of value changes? I think what we're doing what we're doing now to actually expedite it is going abroad and exposing ourselves, not necessarily to say that what is outside is better than what we have here in Malaysia. Definitely there are things that we can take from abroad, and there are things that we should maintain in Malaysia. But what we are also seeing is I think a regression as well in terms of the values that were good in Malaysia, like for example kesopanan dan kesusilaan. We're losing a lot of that. So these things, just respect with our neighbors and our friends and our fellow Malaysians. I think so. So these are the values that we were proud of once, but now we don't even value those things that were existent. So I think there needs to be a reassessment of, it's not relearning or trying to gain new values. It's just having the common sense to maintain what is good and what is bad.
Maybe Nicholas can come online, like turn on your mic, Nick. Do you want to say something? Because I mean, to be fair, right, this issue is, you know, quite a real experience for a lot of educators. It's a bit unfair for the both of us, you know. I mean, I can understand economics, but
I don't
maybe,
have
you know,
answers.
Paging
Sorry,
Nicholas.
I don't have answers. I'm actually not saying new set of values, but that's what you're saying, Sufyan. You know, if you're saying, you know, these are the things that we lost, so how are we gonna,
No, I understand.
you know, re-educating people all these new sets of values? So where should we start? Like, I mean, like what Joanne said, we should start from the kid. So, you know, where is the root cause of all these problems actually? Because a lot of these policies that you are coming up with, I mean, like, it can help for a certain bit, but how far is it gonna, you know, move it along?
I mean,
if the younger kids are still learning the old sets of values that no one is cared. You know,
it's very hard to kind of gauge that. Like I said again, I mean, for me personally, I just set the example, like whatever set of values that I think needs to be is important for me is kind of executed within the office at least. So I think looking at trying to go home on time, creating a flexible office, trying to pay decent salary. So these are things that don't require sort of being abroad to understand. And I think if you are able to do that, and if you can do it with your own set of people around you, I think that's good enough. And then that should infect other people as well. But I think if it's hard, even hard for us to make sure that we don't double park, it's hard for us to make sure we don't even use our signals. It's hard for us to even keep on asking our friends who are just starting out selling, I don't know, chocolate biscuits, and asking them for a discount. I mean, then how are we expecting change from other people? So I think it's not that hard. It's just, it can happen very quickly or it can happen very slowly. It's just depending on how much we do of it.
I want to engage Nicholas on that. I think it's a really important question. Me and Pian always talk about the value shift, and we always talk about culture quite a lot. I think it's very broad. Basically, we want to talk about, you know, the society identity, but eventually it boils down to that. But I think we have to take we have to understand we can make change. You know, that's number one, and we can make change from in our personal circle, our platforms, and, you know, and the vertical up. So I think the important thing is, if we actually come together, then we can make better traction, like a bigger change. We were quite limited in what we could do. So, you know, that's on change. I think when you talk about our mindset, I think we need to start to talk about what is, you know, who is the architect today, you know, and what is architect? What does the architect do today? I have a lot of problem because I graduated as an architect, because people say, oh, he's an architect. But if I start to explain what I do, you know, it's quite diverse, and the term architect is, you know, sort of becomes this pejorative thing that doesn't quite help. And it's quite funny because, you know, that architecture is supposed to be the thing that I do. So we have to start to look, look at our identity, understand the crisis of the architecture identity crisis, and maybe ask this question: what values do we define ourselves with? I think those questions they come in this in the civic spirit of healthy debate, where it's about inclusivity, it's about ability for the minority and the smallest person can talk, and the person with the dominance, is more restrained, and having so all those things with humanities and the debate comes in, and finally, how to achieve it, right? I think we don't have like an oracle. We don't know, but we can definitely have a blueprint.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Nisha's one just posted something. So perhaps I can read it out and then we will move on to
That's
the next
great.
topic. All right. So Nick, or do you want to come online and can you share your opinion? Is Nick online?
Yeah.
Yes, no, yes, no. Okay, if not, I'll just read it out. So by limiting university as tools merely to serve the industry is just as problematic as well. We should bring back meaning into the life of profession, academias, and students. We need to define progress within our own Great Eastern civilization. Maybe we should start to critically question IR4. We ultimately need architectural agenda that we can call our own. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take that.
Thank you.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, hi Shazwan. Thanks for the question. I think we never mentioned that it's something that is mere. I would never use the word merely. I think it's important to understand that human culture and economics are the same thing. It stems from people, from us. It's what we do, our residue, right? And our residue, the activity, it becomes economic activity, it produces something, and then the value, has a commodity value, but it also has the civic values. I think today we did mention that it's a multiple dimensional issue. I mean, the issues such as meaning, and life, these are the civic things, but also it is actually quite helpful to understand the economic structure and where the industry is. And industry is plenty. It might be a sole practitioner, it might be startup, small practices, medium, large. So I think when we look at it in that sort of like system, I think if the struggle is really about having a system structure for small or fragmented or new sort of practices, I think they go along the line of the discussion we're having today, that I think there isn't the policies about this are not there, the discussion is not there, the systemic support is not there. So I think we are actually understanding that that there are a lot of gaps, and I agree with you about the IR 4.0. I think I think last year we talked a lot about digitizing the economy. We talked about green economy, climate change. We talked about creative economy. And yeah, we definitely do need an architecture agenda of our own. I think this is where we mentioned about design and maybe about theory and appreciation of heritage and history, and also that discussion of future narrative. But I think to understand that, how do you sort of bridge this with the vertical up, with the industry, and then with the policymakers, and then with the public as well. It is not like an architectural world. It is a world of societies. So how do the Society of Architects actually deal with the world? Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Taufiq. So we don't have a 5-minute break. I'm so sorry that I didn't keep the time track. So, however, you do have 5 seconds to take a deep breath before we dive into the third and fourth issue. So, for those who wish to leave, you may do so. But for those who wish to stay with us for another maybe half an hour, hopefully, discussion for the next 2 issues, please do stay with us. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I just need to address the Sazwan's question on RR 4.0.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean the national policy that we were reviewing with NPC. I think RR 4.0 was digitizing industry. I think MITI has a IR 4.0 policy. I think we were supposed to get a IR 4.0 policy from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, but that didn't come out. So the question is, when these policies they are drafted, sometimes they are drafted with limitation. So when the table is there, you either you sit there and you draft it, and the government would just take it and implement it. So sometimes it's this uncanniness of, yes, I would say the more architects, the better, because we need more conversations and we need more architects in all levels, Yeah, I think that will be shortly to say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be great that Nate is online, but she's not. It's okay. All right, thank you. Let's dive into issue number 3, which is build adaptiveness to future economies, and issue number 4, youth representation within the board. So this is regarding just now we talked about economies and also about COVID as well. Do you guys want to elaborate a bit on that before we go into questions? Yeah, we do have some questions as well. We have some 3 questions.
I think I just wanted to share my experience of practicing abroad and then coming back and then finding our own niche. I think it's very important to see the opportunities that are there that can be to a certain extent exploited. So we I think as a nation, Malaysians are very resilient. I'll share a story that happened when I was in Melbourne. So we were in a JV office of 150 people. So all of these 150, they're all architects. So it wasn't draftsmen or anything like that. And I think towards the end of the day, sort of people started leaving because it was the end of work. But then the people who stayed there I raised my head, and probably almost a third or probably a quarter of them were Malaysians. So Malaysians in general are very resilient. They're very smart to put themselves there. But at the same time, I think it's really identifying that is a part of who we are, and I think that it's something that we can put forward. Now, having recognized that, how do you find the platform for us to even exploit that? So I think what we are not doing enough is we are still very limited to Malaysian boundaries itself. So I think that there's been discussions where I think if we were to go abroad, if we were to push Malaysians abroad, but still tie it back somehow to the Malaysian economy, I think we can do a whole lot better. We're sitting in the middle of Asia. We're in the middle of everywhere. I think it takes 8 hours to Melbourne, Sydney, another 8 hours to go to Dubai. So I think we're very strategically located. And I think even a survey done a few years ago, especially for Kuala Lumpur, is actually the second best place for expats. So we're actually getting a lot of people.
Which one is the first place?
Singapore.
I think
Singapore. I was thinking.
Not really, right? A bit Singapore.
No, probably would. I'm not sure. I'll have to dig it up again. But I just saw here and I was happy with that. Yeah, but I think but I think it's the adaptivity, the adaptiveness that we need to look out for is, I mean, is abroad. What can we do with people who speak English as a good second language, and we are not English. I think we have a large Chinese population which can converse in Mandarin, for example, and we can have I think the world is moving towards Asia, and I think we have that to exploit by
Yeah.
actually sharing a common language. So I think this is where even for the larger group of Malaysians is to identify that and just use that as our strength. So I think, and this isn't even talking about digital transformation yet. These are talking about things that are happening,
Right now.
changing in a global position, and I think just recognizing it and using it further. But I think Malaysia is we're very complacent. I think we're very safe. We are very comfortable to a certain extent, and we just like complaining, but we don't look at the other things that we can do and where we can become leaders within the region to actually see how things can be done. So if we do start doing that, I think we will be questioning less of our identity, because I think we would be leading it further. So I think that's what we need to be doing.
Taufiq, anything to add on?
I was looking at the comment. Thank you, Nick. See you soon. Well, I think it's about the future of economy. I mean, the future economy. The thing is, on a sort of like a national policy framework, you know, we would generally say, oh, okay, Industry 4.0, digital economy, smart, you know, city, what else? Climate change, right? Low carbon community, creative economy. But I think what's important is sometimes, you know, is the narrative from the ground level and the vision relating to it. Like what about it is adapted to, you know, the context of our city or our place, or, you know, our society. Is it about, you know, like Pian mentioned, is it about our culture, you know? If we are a people who are quite excellent in terms of our ecology, our heritage, and our, you know, what are the point of excellence? Why are we so hung up about, for example, fintech, you know? This is like a mismatch. And I think sometimes a lot of the economic discussion comes from a very sort of broad-based perspective that it loses, like, you know, the ground. So I think this is where, when we talk about future economies and we talk about the role of graduates and those in practice, is to actually fill in that gap, you know, and fill in the narrative and fill in the research and to inform, you know, what do we want when we say smart cities, when we say carbon economy, what do we want? I mean, do we really want, you know, that the battery power plant by what's his name, Elon Musk, to be in Kuala Lumpur, you know?
Why not?
Or do we want to explore something else, you know? How do we want to incorporate our big data and, for example, our digital identity, you know, as a society? Are we going to be like China, you know, like absolute surveillance economy? Or, you know, or Singapore has already done it. So what's our version? So I think beyond the cover of taglines and thematics of future economy, you know, like digital, smart, green, there's a lot of work to be done. So, you know, so this work is really high value. Malaysians are generally, I agree, are excellent. But I just wonder sometimes why we don't forward our, you know, like our narrative and our proposals forward, and why we don't collaborate and figure out how can we utilize each other's strengths, you know, and opportunity to make the changes and to occupy the platforms that where we need to be at. And even if there's not a platform, why don't we emulate like the Koreans, you know? create the societies, create the work groups, the platforms. So, I mean, a lot of them in the memorandum in 2018, right? But I think we're already, by then, we were already behind the wave. But I think also not to be afraid of that and to understand really, you know, what is the real issue, why we're behind the wave here, you know? What is the ability of the government versus what is the talent of, you know, the graduates, and then versus what is the ability of the industry. So these questions, when you put them together in a relation, you know, you get a scenario. So I think for us, we have to have a local scenario. You know, for example, is building 3 islands in Penang a great narrative for us? So, you know, we have to value that question. So there's no need, I think, to talk about everybody knows about all these the thematics, but I'm sure when we talk about the narrative locally, we don't know. So I think maybe we should start looking into that. Yeah, I think maybe we should start working towards our future economy. I think that could be the best way to talk about this.
Definitely.
Right?
I think working towards a future economy, what does that actually mean?
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
like a very big
Yeah.
words, man.
yeah,
Yeah, big words.
Scale it.
yeah, so we're looking at, I usually start out with something fairly easy. We're quite good at exporting our food, and to a certain extent
Good.
that's our culture as well. Like, I mean,
We
if you
give food to
go,
each other, you mean?
yeah, not each other. I mean, if you go to Melbourne, it says, and you see Papa Rich there. It just goes nasi lemak, satay,
Done.
and Malaysian food. So, I mean, nasi lemak is already very well known, and it and on another survey, it's probably one of the healthiest breakfasts in the world, provided
It is though.
you
How
eat it
is that
within the,
possible? I don't.
provided you eat
possible
it
with
with a
10,000
limitation
steps.
lah. But I think I think we have proved that I think certain aspects of what we do can be exported. It's just looking at other things as well, and it's to identify that and know that there is value in that. What I think, like, for example, it is just looking at the Koreans, how they've managed to do that. They were pretty much the same with us 50 years ago, and then suddenly they've taken over the world. What's different? What's different?
Yeah.
We also have a very creative culture. In Malaysia, you go anywhere rural, the craft there is just as good as anywhere within the region. But how do we take it to that next level? How do we produce it so it becomes it's something to feed consumerist culture, for example? So I think these are the questions we need to ask as well. I mean, we have a good bunch of people. Malaysians are all around the world, because of, I think we just have this I think tradition of sending our students abroad. Some
Yeah.
of them decide to stay on, some of them decide to return. But what happens is there's already, you're talking about a diaspora in a negative sense, but it actually can be a positive sense. I'm actually talking with friends who are setting up an art gallery in Australia, but focusing on Malaysiana themes. So there are people who not only Malaysians who've decided to migrate abroad that are keen on these things, but also even locals or foreigners to us who are also keen on our art and our culture. So I think these are things that we need to see and identify. But how do we use I think the the I think global sort of progress to kind of find ways to help us. I mean, we can still sort of do a songkit in about 3 months, but how does that help the Malaysian in general? So we need to kind of scale it up. So Taufiq is talking about scalability. So that's the next question. How do we scale ourselves up? I mean, we're the same population as Australia, about 30 million people. But what's different?
But
So I think,
Yeah.
but you're saying those example using art and culture. How about architecture itself? Is it exportable and scalable?
well,
Yeah.
we're exporting a lot of architects. A lot of architects
Yeah.
are registered over there.
Talent. Yeah.
I mean, we're finishing a job in Dublin at the moment. So it's the size of the building is 450,000 square feet. It's just as big as any job in Malaysia, and we're doing it over there. And their clients are in San Francisco. So I think definitely it can be done. It's just that I think the message here is, what type of support do we need, and who gives us that support? So these are the questions we need to be in a position where we can actually ask the government. So, Mr. Government, how do I get myself to the US, for example? I have a good product. How do I do that? This is where they come in. But if we're not asking the questions first, we're just expecting, why am I not getting all these jobs in the US?
Complain.
Just complain again. We're not posing the question, and we're saying this is a good product because I just came back, I just found out about this, and it's because it's cheaper to produce in Malaysia. We can export this globally. But I need help from the government to establish the government to government relationship, so it makes it feasible, or get my contacts from there, or get or to become part of that party that goes internationally. At the moment, I think in the last Rancangan Malaysia 11, architecture wasn't even part of export. And we were lost in the last 5 years. So how did that help?
What happened?
What happened? That didn't even help the economy. It didn't even help architects in general. So it was because
we're not in the national budget.
We weren't in the national budget because we failed to become part of that conversation. So I think becoming
the construction industry weights quite fairly important in the Malaysian economy, no? In your opinion?
I
think it's number 3, I think.
But it falls. But it falls very low in terms of manufacturing. We're very big on manufacturing and exporting manufacturing services. But this is even when you talk about the term manufacturing, I mean, construction can be part of manufacturing as well.
IBS system.
Correct. At the moment, we're still producing everything on site. Everything is bespoke. Everything is in situ, and we're not harnessing this aspect for it to become a high value economy. So if we were looking at IBS and exporting it, for example, we would definitely need to digitalize. We have our models virtually. We need to build it virtually once, and we need to build it physically another time. But then we would be asking more skilled people to become a part of that process, instead of getting low, cheap, very unskilled workers from other countries, and we're too dependent on them at the moment. So that's what's happening.
I mean, I wonder, when Joyee, you asked about the percentage of architecture and engineering services to sort of evaluate whether we are a priority in our national budget. Was that the concern? Why would it be important? So for me, I would ask that question because the thing about Malaysia is that we're so hung up with numbers and ranking, right? Are we number 1? Are we number 7? It doesn't matter, because if you want your economic sector to be emerging and growing, you have to do the economic activity, and you have to present your need statement and work it into a white paper so that it becomes a policy. And I think on the other end, to add further, it's also about not reinventing the wheel, because there's a lot of actually trade support, because Malaysia essentially is a trade nation. We're number 10 in the world, right? 20 top most competitive. So there's actually a lot of trade export, facilities under MITI and all the government agency. Of course, government ministries are not that excellent with outreach program, and primarily due to the fact that we are even like a niche industry sector, although we're considered high value or strategic, we are not within maybe the coverage, but also maybe the fact that this needs to be made more known. But again, because of who actually receives this info, are they generally the conventional practitioners? So if you're you're further segregated down the line, and you're not formalized or you're not represented, so you really fall off the radar. And sometimes that makes everything seem like a Herculean effort, versus like in a sort of developed industry or country or society where all these questions they've been asked, they have like perfect guideline, you should go here, meet this ministry, blah blah blah. So it's a mix of a lot of issues. Yeah.
Thank you. Yep. So we answered sort of the first question. So perhaps we should look at maybe the second one. What is the relationship between the fourth industrial revolution with the architect as a profession? Could we be seeing a more fragmented and diverse set of architectural services? I think it's related to what we have mentioned earlier, the non-conventional and also the multidisciplinary mode of practice. How do we really encourage that, and also how do we convince the client to accept as well, right?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it even just before with IBS, for example. I think the question that we're also asking is what comes with Industrial Revolution 4.0? Yeah. So what is it about? I mean, it's about the use of the transformation in digital technology. So when we say digital technology, how does that affect architects per se?
How is the technology performing in Malaysia now in terms of architecture?
Yeah, so if we were to look at, I think the way architecture is produced, I think again, if we go to site, or even when we're designing, sometimes we say, we design quickly so that we can do all the authority submissions, and then we go out to tender, and then once it goes out to construction, it actually goes to the Bangladeshi to actually build up the walls, and he just got off the boat yesterday, doesn't know how to put bricks together, and the wall's going that way and this way, and it's all wrong, and we need to tear it down, and you don't get a quality product from it. So from there, I think we are trying to use digital technology to kind of erase all that discrepancy. So once we do that, we have to question where in the process can it come in to make these situations or framework or even processes a lot more efficient. So when we're designing, for example, with COVID, suddenly when COVID happened, everybody cannot do work because everybody's got their own computer. The plan is in one computer, the elevation is in another computer, the perspective is in another computer. It's not even in a cloud or central server. So these are the things that we can be doing internally to actually create better processes from a design point of view. Once it's in a design, even in a design point of view, it's making things a lot more transparent. So transparent in a sense, everybody knows in the team what everyone is doing. If everybody is just working up in isolation, you think that it's right, but you only find out it's wrong on site. So for example, that section looks really beautiful on his drawing because he's just a very good draftsman, but because it's not incorporated in a singular workflow, you'll never be able to find out if it's truly right if it's not built yet. So I think this is where I think we need to harness some of the potential of BIM, for example, but we need to localize it. So I think a lot of people talk about BIM and then they talk about all these parametric,
theoretical, right?
theoretical, yeah, you can do everything. Just client sit in front of a computer, press button, get 50 options. So that's not necessarily the way I think BIM is supposed to operate. BIM is just a method of working. It's a method of working which it actually is a information managing system. So what we're trying to say is, dulu when we used to draw a line, it just means it's a line. Now when we draw a line, it's actually a wall. So that wall actually has information. It's broken up into parts where it's render, where it's brick, where it has its rebars, etc. And you actually can do. It's very information rich. So when it's information rich, of course the outcome becomes a lot better because it's already managed in a certain way. So I think when we're saying, when we do progress further with IR 4.0, it's not to make things faster, or it can, but at the same time it's actually about making things more information rich.
It's the quality.
So it's the quality. So I think that's where I think it's most important, rather than just looking at, or it's not to press a button and then suddenly you get architecture. It's actually putting more information, making it a lot more rich, so the product is better quality.
Thank you.
Well,
Taufiq?
sorry. Wow.
No worries.
Okay, getting question two, the question is Industry 4.0, it's an economy, it's an industry revolution. If we talk about architect as a profession, we're talking about what sort of jobs, right? I think the type of jobs, depending if you are talking about an architecture master's or part 2 graduate, or if you're asking about whether these are architects already in the industry. So, you know, these are different topics. And maybe a third one is, if you are an architectural business entity, you know, where do you sit in within the Industry 4.0? So as an economy, I think Industry 4.0 entails the, again, the carbon economy, the green economy, digitizing all the conventional industries, but also it's also about the new industries, you know. Industries that are created because they are disrupting, or they are bridging a gap where the conventional industries, you know, currently serve, but there's like a demand for higher value or new type of services by the market.
Such as?
So if, such as, for example, urban tech, you know, or like I said, the carbon economy. So that would push into a lot of stuff like production of in construction, you know, materials that are green. So these are conventional. Or if they are new, then it's new technology. How do you power a city, or how do you provide an alternative mode of mobility, transportation? So that's why I think urban tech is one of the main technology, or you know, solutions when it comes to how to say, future-proofing a city with reliance on technology and specialists. Under urban tech, you can put like smart city. You can also go to building, which is smart buildings, you know.
Understand
so
you
smart
work,
building.
you work with a government, a lot of big scale like master planning. So has any of the project involved this urban tech proposal?
For the Kampung Baru one, unfortunately, it was more of an like economic and public space, and that was 2016, and that was preceding, I think at that time, any sort of smart city talk. But I think in 2018, when we did Bukit Bintang, and it was about redevelopment, I did mention that with the retrofitting of Industry 4.0, and also with big data, propose a gap of, it doesn't fall under my scope of work, but I highlighted that there is a need for a digital city information system So it is sort of today, I think it's articulated as city twin, right? Digital city twin.
Yeah, digital
which
twin.
is which is a sort of city level of BIM, right?
Yeah.
And this
Maybe
is sorry, yeah,
I just wanted to add to that. I mean, it's also relating to the comment from Amos that BIM is pointless. But again, it's only pointless if we're still doing low value projects. So I think if things start to progress, and if we're targeting smart cities, for example, we are also looking at an environment where even OSC is going towards digital submission, and BIM will sooner or
digital
later,
governance,
BIM will sooner or later, a BIM model or an intelligent model, let's not call it a BIM model, it sounds like a bad word, an intelligent model becomes a part of the submission. So when it becomes a part of the submission, it actually adds to a bigger framework or a bigger database. So once you have that database, you can actually make a lot more informed decisions about the city. You can do simulations, you can do testing, you can do, I think, planning through an informed database. At the moment, there isn't a place where you can see everything virtually or digitally that you can get. So I think this is where I think about what Taufiq was talking about. It's happening. It's happening, and it's up to us to actually direct it in the way where it's localized.
If it's so beneficial, why don't we just make it compulsory for all students to learn, and then
Actually,
all companies?
I think tailors, they've really changed. They're required to learn Revit.
I see. Okay.
But Revit is not BIM.
No, it's not.
BIM is a whole process. It's not the same.
We can go into this whole conversation about BIM. Let's save it another day. But you're right. Revit is not BIM. BIM is not Revit. Revit is just a tool to produce BIM. BIM is just a method of managing information. So let's leave it at that. Well, the key word here is information, and what do we do with that information, and how do we capture that information? And of course, we're talking about the Internet of Things and big data, and it's also talking about new types of work. So data scientists, for example, how do architects become data scientists and feeds back into the construction industry? So these are types of jobs that we're looking at. I mean, I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I utilize a data scientist so I can make my buildings perform better, or just internally how to make my processes a lot more informed.
Yeah. Okay. If I want to get back to the point in the 2018 with the Bukit Bintang project about the digital twin, and fast forward 2020, I think in my presentation to the DBKL for the physical plan draft, I did mention about an entire the importance of actually digitize the city. Sorry, it's a bit late. So I'm a
ending
bit
soon.
drifting. So I think what was important with that was I think I highlighted that the draft city plan needed to incorporate like the digital twin, and also to institutionally include a digital technology executive director. So DVKL has 4 executive directors. So they need to have the political will, or the bureaucratic will to sort of push all the digital transformation that needs to happen. And it doesn't just include the IT infra, but it also includes the culture. So this digital technology executive director needs to look at innovation, needs to basically look at collaborative work, and needs to look at sort of funding for all those culture, and value shift that we need to do to basically adopt digitalization. And this is because simply digitalization would increase transparency, it would cause actually a human level value shift. So I think there's a lot of sort of dealing with how you need to train and need to get people who have a long-standing culture of a specific way of working and a specific way of looking at problems and values and their reaction, and to sort of to get them to start to live on the digital, and to see that maybe their jurisdiction and their roles are going to change, with validation, with coding, that's going to basically make digital governance very quick. But what does that mean when it comes to their role? What happens to the public administrators, who are used to basically be, paper-based administration? Now that an AI, is doing a bulk of their work, where are they going to be retrained? So these questions, they need to be not just asked, but they need to be managed, navigated, and sort of strategized in a transformative way. So the digital officer needs to be there. Yeah, in short. Yeah, so there's a lot. The other stuff is stuff like, reducing KL road so that, because of automation, control point of traffic, increasing the efficiency of public transportation,
reduce car
city
park
information. Yeah, so everything that you read online, you name it. But those are the two important things for KL, in my opinion. Yeah.
Thank you, Taufiq. Yep.
Number 3, there's no answer to that.
It's all right.
I
think every profession is suffering, not just architecture.
I think there's a saying, market corrects itself,
Yeah.
It's a very vicious saying. Yeah, it will make you pivot if you have to. Yeah. Question 4.
Yes, let's go on to our last question. Issue number 4, that borders youth. Yep. So come on, guys, you guys can do it. So number 4.
No, I'm actually glad. I'm actually glad we're actually talking about it. It's 2 years late. But
you guys have never speaking of this in the public before, or the memorandum?
No, not in this extent, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So yeah, I think just touching on this topic, it's very important. I think why it's necessary to have that representation is just to have the voice. So if we don't have the voice, none of what we've talked about before will be heard by the people in power. So the people in power that makes up the policies, or even for us to be in a position of power, we need to be in a position where that opinion gets validated and gets put into policy. So I think how do we find our way there? I think the first way is to have discourse, and the second is to have that discourse within the institutions that matter, whether it's in academia, whether it's in the institutes like PAM, whether it's in the board. Yeah, that's right. So this is where we need to start having a younger representation there. So like Taufiq was saying, I think we are already transitioning into a different generation. So who's going to take it up from the younger generation? So I think this is a very important question for us to ask within this forum itself. Who will take on the baton and bring the issues? Would it get lost, or will we be for example, Architect Nazlan? Will the irony be we will be just discussing the same thing again in the next 10 years?
2010. Manifestos are built upon past manifestos. Fair enough. I think it's important as well to know what is the manifesto of today. I think the best that me, Suffian, and also our fantastic people in the PAM Next graduate, all of them, I think they gave us a lot of enthusiasm and motivation as well. But the more the participation, the more combustible it is. I think the higher value of content that we get, and I think that's what we want. We want the best of participation. I think that's super important. This thing about participation in terms of platform, do we want to talk about, because this is within the board, right? So I guess this question is really about PAM. Is that correct?
You can say so. Yeah. Good. Actually,
Oh, maybe not.
pertaining to the discussion, I have two questions. So regarding the PAM one, right? Like you said
Okay.
earlier, the council member, they are elected, they are not voted.
I can explain quickly.
Yeah, that's one question. And second question will be, you're talking about participations, right? So I remember one of the statistics from the graduate survey 2019 was showing that in the central Malaysia, KL, so the numbers of non-PAM member graduates and the PAM member graduates, they are almost the same. So there's this a big numbers of graduate students who are not PAM member. So did they give a reason like why they are unaware of PAM or they don't want to join PAM?
Do you want to bring out the paper, the PAM chapter paper?
Yeah, I can. I just see my screen. This part.
This one is the PAM survey. The paper, the Words document, I think PDF.
This one?
Yeah, this one.
Great.
I think. Yeah, so you can just zoom it open.
Was it on
this page? Yeah, that's 4 pages, I think. So I think just looking at the Pian, do you want to present this because you've kind of presented it? Okay. I think generally there, if you look at the this paper, right? I think this is a representation. I think in total we are saying there is first page. Sorry.
Yep.
So in total, there's generally LAM record says there's about 2,500 graduates, you know, and in LHDN, generally there are 13,000 people who pays tax, you know, with the Lembaga Hasil Dalam Negeri.
So we know category of architecture.
Yeah, and then we generally have about 2,000 plus ARs, you know, corporate architects. So if you do the maths right, generally those who are not, those who are outside the 2,000 from the 13,000, it means that there's about 11,000 members within the graduate category. So this is what I mean by representative bureaucracy, is that if you're not represented, it's very highly unlikely that your values and your issues will be, you know, like mentioned. And looking at the way how the PAM council is sort of set up, how many council members in total, Pian?
There's four office bearers, and there's 13 council members, and there's I think 3 non-corporate members, and there's also additional
20 lah.
About 20
ish. So about 20-ish council members, and you need to know that PAM is governed by the constitution. So the only corporate members can vote, you know. So all the graduate members, we cannot vote. So they will vote for council replacement. And what happens is after they are elected into office, when they win the vote, they then have, on the constitution, they are allowed to actually elect 3 non-corporate member representatives.
2?
So onto the council, but they have no voting right.
Okay.
So you see, so Pian was the chair and elected for 2019-2020. The year before was Alia Aida, and then the year before was Husam, right? And I think eons before, I think the first, I think Mustafa was one of them. Mustafa, you know.
Oh, I didn't.
And then
Fazlan,
and also Fazlan as well. Yeah. So the thing is, our representation is by you know, only 1. So when you look at 1 to 20 versus 11,000 to 2,000, you get me? Can you go next?
Next page.
Next page. I think the issue here is that we want to talk about this next. It's not the issue. Next.
Oh, you're talking about this, is it?
No, never mind. So I think the issue we have here is that how do we get, number one, out of the 11,000, only 2,000 actually register in, as graduate architects with PAM. It's the same issue with the current election. I think other people who voted, I think Kawa, is he still here?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
I think Kawa ran for election. I'm quite surprised he didn't make it. But I think it might be that also I think, this is my speculation, that a lot of new architects are also not registered, as a corporate member in PAM. So this is, you see, it's not just one dimension, it's quite a lot. So we need people to basically, come and participate in this, society in order to, get more impact and representation. And I think that the change that we want to see is not just to say the idea of a chapter, but we want the institution, the PAM constitution to be amended to want to allow graduate participation and to give graduates voting rights, right? Yeah. For me,
but
I'm a
also,
bit more.
but also the autonomy to do events and activities that graduates see important. So
Yeah.
for example, if it had that, I used to call it a room within a bigger house. Right now it's just sharing rooms with another committee. So I think we wanted a chapter.
A room in a room.
Yeah, it's a room in a room. So what we wanted was the autonomy to do whatever we wanted, but at the same time, I mean, we would still be reporting to PAM as the mothership. But at the same time, we in terms of doing the activities we wanted, get an appropriation of the funds that that people actually paid to become member or graduate member to go into the activities required by graduates. At the moment, we graduates need to ask for money. It's not given, because even though to be a part of PAM, you are paying for a graduate member, but it goes into just the larger fees. It doesn't go specifically towards graduate.
I was looking for that slide because I think our total fees is actually about 200,000 plus, So you can imagine a basic committee budget is I think roughly about 50K, right, Pian?
Yeah.
So
less.
That yeah, or less. So and then for events, like generally an event like Maya's or let's say like a graduate symposium for 2 days generally will cost you about 45 to 50K.
Yeah.
Like a full impact with participation and blah blah blah. So 200K definitely can run you for an entire year. So we don't have autonomy for that. What we get is actually lesser than 50K for a subcommittee representing a large constituency.
But we were also talking about once you have that autonomy, you can actually register with the Ministry of Youth. Yeah. So under the registrar of youth. Yeah. So then you are there is the access towards grants and funds for you to run activities for youth. So I think by denying the establishment of a graduates chapter, you're denying the possibility of accessing that funds for more youth. So it's not only 200,000; it's actually you can go up to 250,000 within the grant.
Plus ministry contribution.
Ministry contribution as well. So you can actually do a lot. So it's if we understand these things. And we create a mechanism for it to be established, then we can be doing a lot more rather than just, I don't know, just typing on Facebook.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm a bit more also like maybe hot-headed. I do feel that the council should actually also be represented maybe an affirmative action to get 50% of council members to be 40 and below. Because that would actually represent like the real urgency of when I say the young professional immediacy with being competent, technologically relevant, and also the executive. So I think there's a lot of, people who are a bit out of touch, I'm sorry to say that, and they rely a lot on the leadership, and this is seldom acknowledged. And I think if we read a lot about the youth leadership around the world, this global issue of transition and succession, there's a lot of lack of recognition and acknowledgement, and it basically is quite a challenge to sort of to sort of allow this like maximum impact. I think that is actually, for me, and this is my view, that if we were to see like a very sort of onboarding of the institution, they would actually allow and basically ensure that representation, happens that way. I mean, it could be another way where, every single council member has a graduate mentee, that could be the way as well, like a shadow youth council member.
Yeah. So I think that was kind of what we were proposing as well. I mean, the graduates chapter would be a shadow of actual PAM council. So once you kind of go through the motions of the graduate chapter becoming part of PAM council, you'd already learned the ropes. So and I think then you would be discussing more mature content rather than just sometimes arguing on minutes of meetings. So
yeah.
So I think this is where sort of conditioning that maturity has to start from very early. So I think we need to be doing that within our own circle of graduates and younger architects, so that once we do enter the foray, we're well equipped and ready to execute.
You mentioned about Victoria chapter earlier, right? So they are like equivalent of PAM in Melbourne.
Yeah.
So they run differently, or
they run. They're basically autonomous. They run by themselves, but they are also under I think the Victorian registration board. No, under the Victorian. The AIA, so Australian Institute of Architects. So each state has its own chapter and they function independently. But then again, they decide what they want to do. They have dedicated funds for what they want to do. And besides that as well, they also have dedicated student unions that also are attached to the institute. So what happens there, when you're a student, you already know of what the institution is doing, and then you kind of graduate to young architects. Then from young architects, you go into the bigger council. But what's happening with us is we wait for a long time of just trying to become an architect, but we're not dealing with the issues that affect the industry. And once we do go into that position, there aren't enough of us to take it the extra step to make it very effective. Yeah, very effective policy, or to become impactful. And what people do is they don't do anything. And that's why we were kind of left behind in the last 5 years. We weren't a part of any government plan.
Yeah, we just didn't get there because we didn't band together on the platform, so we just didn't get to the next level, unfortunately. Yeah.
We should definitely let the government know our existence.
You have to.
So I think we're
in terms of voting rights as well, the next elections, everyone above 18 will be voting.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We find it hard to get on council at 40. What does that say with the state of our industry?
Come on, guys. We need to be a bit more like, vocal about it. I think we're facing like this systemic, like maybe I'm not going to call it systemic oppression, but I would say we don't have systemic support. I think it's very important that the problem with the minority syndrome, like it's very unusual for the graduate to say, okay, we don't have all this, because like gaslighting is very easy as well. I'm not saying we're being gaslighted, but what I'm saying is that if a lot of the priority of issues that are faced, usually when a minority group or an under accessible group is promoting those issues, it doesn't get prioritized, or it gets diluted by issues of those within the system or the institution, and those issues are on their top list. So often you see that our issues get simplified, generalized, relegated somewhere, and in fact, for 11,000, strong people out there, and with the bulk of stuff that we have talked today, right, about practice, about issues, and the different forms of practices, in different fields. For example, in the PAMNEX committee, we realized that a lot of us actually work in very diverse fields, so again, there's a lot of diversity in the graduate and young. That's
diversity as in it's still within the design field, but it's just different mode.
No, really diverse. Like some of them do like heritage architecture, conservation work. Sorry, some are doing
designer handbags,
design, fashion.
Some are in music.
Yeah, music.
Some are journalists.
That's nice.
And some are doing a few jobs at once. I think most of us are. So, where does that come in? This is the majority of the narrative. I mean, why are they showing this idea that everybody is like, a large company like BIG, right? It's not that, So why are we obsessed with that narrative as if that's like how the issues are formed from, the narrative of those who are occupying the institution versus, like the issues of the 90% of the SMEs and also the graduates, in the industry, within all our fragmented, form of practices, whatever we're doing. So we're not even able to start to talk about that. So we really need to, we need to get the systemic support, and we need to ask for it. That's very important. Yeah.
Thank you. Yep. So to end
the
this
last
session,
question is quite key, number 4.
Yeah, let's pick one question.
I think why don't me and Pian ask you guys question number 4? Maybe you guys can say something. Yeah. Why don't you guys say for question 3 and 4? Why don't you guys take the mic? We'll listen.
Yeah.
Not like we're Pam or Lam, but we'd like to know.
Do young people in Malaysia want to unionize and face the problem heads on? If no, why?
Yeah, what do you guys think?
Probably it's just the attitude that doesn't want to be bothered, as in don't want to take responsibility.
Okay, attitude.
Someone wants to say something.
Okay, attitude, like chill, all these are really bullshit attitude. Yeah.
Because they are not in the position yet.
Yeah. Because they don't know what is happening. And then they are in a bubble, I think. They're being painted an image that, it's their fault. It's their fault,
Do they want to unionize?
Let me post this
of
question
course you want
into
to
the
unionize,
story.
do something,
yeah, post it back to you.
Of course, we all do want to unionize, but unionize with the mindset that is like very informed, not to unionize, do something like, I don't know. Trump also unionized, right? Trump's people also unionized to go with him, right? And that is sort of a bad leadership you have. But if you were well informed, you have a union, right? It's a sort of different thing. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah.
But you see, and it seems that for us that no, I mean I have no other point actually, because we're talking about graduates, right? Phew.
Yeah.
I feel like the people here, we actually want to unionize, but I think the problem is the people who are not here. They might not want to unionize. Like, they don't care. Like, they just want to have a job and then just want to go by their lives and then, don't want to involve in this kind of stuff. And then that also kind of lead to why there's a low representation in LAM or PAM as well. Like,
Yeah.
why is not young people getting involved in LAM and PAM?
Yeah, I think that's the sad part about it. You kind of say, oh no, I can't be bothered because I just want to figure myself or my career out, and then suddenly 10 years go by, and then suddenly you want to do something, but it's too late.
And
So
and also we have friends. Consider myself as someone who came in from overseas, right, and then complaining all the way without doing anything, and then
yeah,
also they just want to run away from like the reality that you face.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. It's
So
like
so
yeah,
so I think we all know the issues. The
yeah,
issues are all there, quite blatant in front of us.
yeah,
It's just that the next question is, what do we want to do about it?
yeah. Agree. Like what can we do? What's this? It just like what's a small effort that we can.
That's right.
You need
So
to do
so
like a 360 change, right? Like what is
yeah,
the first step? Everyone make a first step, right? What is the first step we can
that's
do?
right. But I'm glad we're doing this tonight, and I think generally what I'm seeing is a lot more discourse happening. So I've always believed that architecture does not necessarily mean building. Discourse is
Yeah,
also part of architecture, and I think because without discourse, how would you know what to build?
yeah,
Mhm.
What type of culture are you trying to inculcate
yeah,
within
Why
your
you
building?
build?
yeah.
What
Why we build?
values?
Yeah, why we
Why you build the?
yeah,
That's right. So having the discourse and having the platform is also a part of that union and trying to push it forward. But you can't
yeah,
leave it too late. It needs progressive build up.
yeah.
So
Agree.
so I think part of that lesson I called it part 2.5. So it's between part two when you graduate and part three
And
when you
part
get
three.
professional
Yeah.
registration. Is that wilderness of is the architectural wilderness where you don't really know. Are you supposed to just work? Am I getting enough? Am I learning enough? Am I getting the right skill set? But no one is there to tell you. So I think this is where we need to come in together and just inform graduates and younger architects about even if you're a year out, what have you learned within that year? So that person who's just entering, I think the industry knows exactly what to do or how to carry themselves.
Sorry,
I
I
think
would like to, yeah, if you guys, sorry, if you don't mind, I would like to answer the number 3 and number 4. For me,
Oh.
PAM is not really matter to me unless I attend some of the PAM lecture, which is very useful for me. But for LAM, which I don't really care, because if I'm studying from a certain school which is not accredited by LAM, then what should I bother about it? You see. So and we also mentioned about, even though you wanted to design, doesn't mean that you have to be an architect to design, because architects is like much more like a ticket that you get at that ticket to operate or own a practice. That's how I see. Because for design, I still can work in a firm and I can still call myself as a designer, because I still submitting the drawings, I submitting all the get
And
the tender stage or whatnot, right? I mean, submitting can be another person, signing can be another person. That's what I see, because in local, there's a lot of local firm actually doing that way. I'm not saying that I'm protecting their business model or even defending the professional architects. But speaking of that, I mean, a lot of architects, when we talk about like Simon W before that, when they are promoting their property advertisement, they were talking about like lifestyle architects or emotional architects, and then it sort of set the community on rage, because they are saying that you are not registered architect, right? So I think and that can be brought up to my final 2 questions, if you guys don't mind, and then because it's 11:30 now, so I thought that can be
Can I just say it? The Zoom will cut off at 12, okay? I said 4 hours.
Okay.
Go on, yeah.
So the final question was saying that, do young people in Malaysia want to unionize? Yes, because a lot of people wanted to unionize in a way to brought up these issues, because like Tauf and Suffian, you guys have been doing, you have your own practice to work on then. And at the same time, I also wonder like why you wanted to spend your time to write
Come
about
back to
memorandum,
Malaysia.
go for meetings or whatnot. Of course, I see the value in it because those are actually impacting your business as well. Because if let's say we don't talk about minimum fee, then it will continue abuse your practice, right? So I see, yes, even though just Taufiq and Suffian, just two people, actually technically you are unionizing in a way to submit that memorandum. So come back to my questions. I have a very particular question for two of our speaker, respectively. So for Suffian, I would like to ask, like, what do you see the difference in your life before and after obtaining an AR in Malaysia, particularly? Because I'm aware that you are a registered architect in Australia. So do you mind to briefly talk about it, about the difference? And for Taufiq, I would like to ask, are you pursuing for Part 3? If it's not, then do you see pursuing for a Part 3 is helpful for your current practice? Because you were talking about your practice is much more on urban strategies, right? So in that case, do you really see that LAM or PAM are helping non-ARs to do this sort of alternate practice? Because I mean, a lot of people are actually passionate about architecture, but doesn't mean that we are keen to get an AR. See, because we wanted to design, but it doesn't mean that we wanted to be a registered architect. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh wow.
Since the first one was addressed to me, I'll probably answer that. I just wanted to clarify, I'm not yet an architect in Malaysia.
Why you want to burn him right in the hole, right?
So sorry, because I really thought AR Suffian.
No. I'm no AR. I'm just EN Suffian. Encik Suffian.
Okay.
So
It's okay. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
No. But the thing is, I mean, I don't mind. To me, it is a process that I need to go through. I am, however, registered in Melbourne under the state of Victoria. The main difference is there are a few differences. One, the process of getting registration. Two, the scope in terms of liability, risk management, how it's shared. And three, of course, I think the value of architects within the society as well. So one, I think the attitude towards registration is slightly different compared to Malaysia. Malaysia, you're here. Let's go over there first. In Melbourne, it's pretty much the same. You have to do 2 years out. After doing the 2 years, you'll do your exams, and then you will be assessed whether or not you can be registered. But knowing that you are 2 or 3 years out, they don't expect you to know somebody who has practiced for 30 or more years. So I think it's more the framework of how it's set up is to see whether or not you have the character or the code of conduct of an architect to look for the answers where you're supposed to, rather than trying to just hafal the whole thing, and then the guidelines or the policies can change the next year, and then suddenly what you already know is kind of superseded. So compared to kind of like Malaysia, they're expecting you to know or to even hafal the whole contract clause by clause, and probably to regurgitate it again. So I don't know, but that's how it's done here. And having said that, I've done my oral twice, but I'm not ashamed of it. I mean, it's just to show, like, maybe I'm an example of why is it so hard? I'm trying to figure it out myself. Like I've done buildings in Melbourne, not small buildings, big buildings. We're doing one in Ireland at the moment. So I mean, these are real buildings. So what's the difference? Of course, the laws are different, but then again, the act of building or trying to find that information, we have the internet nowadays. If we don't have if we have a question and trying to find the answer, not only can we look it up on the internet, we can WhatsApp our friends within council or respective body, or the institute should come up with practice notes as well. So we're moving forward. It's just that the attitude towards registration is slightly different. So that's one. Two, I think in terms of the actual liability, the risk is shared. There's another consultant, professional consultant, which they call a building surveyor. A building surveyor in Malaysia is somebody who evaluates the I think the figure or the actual value of the building. Whereas over there,
QS.
The QS. So over there, the building surveyor actually manages the compliance of the building. So they are the one who's kind of like how we say submitting architect or the submitting person. They actually submit it. So they would go through the checklist, compare it to the bylaws and the guidelines or best practice industries, best practice, and make sure
You're saying the QS is making sure the building is
not the QS. It's a building surveyor. It's a separate consultant. So they're part
like
of the
a
team.
property surveyor, isn't it?
No, property surveyor. So that's what's in Malaysia. It's just called a building surveyor, but the building surveyor is actually managing the compliance process. So they look things at disability, they look at fire compliance, etc. So what happens is that task in Malaysia, we handle it.
Yeah.
So a lot of our energy goes into compliance, figuring that stuff out. So once that happens, our fees dah lah kecil. It goes for that. And where's the amount supposedly for design? Nowhere. So if you take that out of the equation, it goes, somebody needs to pay for the compliance, it's under the building surveyor. The architect does what they do best. They do the design. So the fees is just for designing. But at the same time, there's that shared responsibility in terms of liability of making sure the performance of the building and the safety of the building is complied, so it's fit for purpose and safe for the public. So I think that's two different angles. The last one, of course, I think what we've been talking about is the value and the culture of architecture. I think even people talk about architecture on the trams. Whether or not they love it, they hate it, they're quite articulate about it. They go to the open houses. The Melbourne Open House is like a festival. Everybody here we line up for bubble tea. There they line up to walk into architecture. So I think it's completely different in terms of the attitude. So I think that's what we're trying to create here. And we're trying to have this discourse to kind of enlighten everyone that I think we need to be the start of these changes, but it's important everyone to realize their roles and to be a part of it. And then only then will we see the type of architect or the ARs that we hope to see in the future. If not, it's just about the architecture of compliance.
It's the same in Singapore also.
Yeah.
Sorry, you're saying?
Right. No, it's okay. No. Thanks, Sufyan. How about you, Tauf? Like, do you think the necessity of Part 3 is important to your practice?
Let me answer your question. I mean, the first question is very painful for me. Are you pursuing your Part 3? I think I'll start with my advice would be for a lot of young architects who are especially working in corporate offices to just immediately, work on your logbook and get your Part 3 done. Because it's actually, what's important is that I do understand the perception that, a Part 3 doesn't necessarily mean, like your ability and your competency, but Part 3 actually certifies it, And I think it's hard for you to say, oh, I'm quite good in contracts, or I'm quite capable. But having the Part 3 means that, you have went through a sort of, a validation of your competency as, project implementation and also contract administration. And I think a lot of my peers who have, gained their Part 3, they do actually, I do see they practice in a higher esteem, they have a better professionalism when it comes to the delivery of their job, because that, is something that they need to uphold, because getting the Part 3 itself means that you need to practice according to your responsibilities.
Code of
As for
conduct of a
myself,
professional.
yeah, I think for myself, I would say I have a bit of like a lost opportunity to basically leverage on some of my experiences because personally for me, I think in the beginning, I didn't regret it. I'm just saying that it's a lost opportunity because I think I was misinformed when I was a bit younger about that you could actually just register for the exam, and get your experiences, For me, I found out that you have to be registered with LAM, So I'm one of those cases where I wasn't initiated about PEM and LAM or the differences. And I just found out later that if you didn't register from before and keep your membership sort of active, like those periods of time would not be considered valid. Although I was working, fully under a practice that is run by chartered architects. So I would say, am I pursuing my part 3? My focus hasn't been on that. When I left, it has never been as well. But not to say that my competency is not there as well. I'm just thinking about this. My focus have always been due to my job and my responsibility in looking at the brief and feasibility aspect of work, So I think up to a lot of design and also feasibility reports. And I think somehow it went into development strategy, and then it went to development strategy on a city scale. So, and I've always had a bigger appreciation on public spaces and urban design. So I think by chance and also by interest, I kind of veer into that. I am actually more interested to figure out how to get a planner's qualification.
Yeah,
and also to study economics.
Because I hope that this question doesn't put you in a hard position, because I actually wanted to,
why?
I'm just curious, like, why don't you pursue for that? Because a lot of people actually, they don't think they need it, like a lot, like perhaps like architectural graphic designer or renderers, like why would they wanted to pursue for that? Is it lagging?
No.
You stuck.
Oh.
Yeah. Maybe if I can add to that, I think I think even if you look at the trend of the survey, after 7 to 10 years, they kind of decide to do something else, and it's because of that as well, because you start to focus on other things, or you start specializing into a certain sort of niche area. But then that's where you need to say back to I think the board, okay, what opportunities are there for me as well to be part of this in a legitimate manner? So then you kind of go back to I think, so now you're asking things like, okay, now the board is saying, okay, you have things like architectural technologists, and it's further defined. So I think it's up to us, again, as a responsibility to figure out these individual or sort of niche areas where we can actually look at pursuing alternatives to that part 3. So say if you're no longer interested in that, but you still see it's important for that accreditation, so you can, even if you decide to start up your own business or anything, then there is a route for that. So I think that's what's important.
I didn't catch your feedback just now, Gary. You said something about in the hot seat or something.
No, I was saying that getting an AR is definitely like an option. It really depends on your specialization or your practice, because some people might wanted to go for renders, then they can choose not to, because they don't need that, right? Because, for example, nowadays there's a lot of things to come out, like Beam or Revit instructor. They might don't need to get the AR, you see. So that's how I see it. It's totally up to a choice of an individual. But I'm afraid that will this option, personal option, influence the society looking at someone? Like, for example, my parents might expecting me to get an AR, then only I can name my son as an architect, you see. Because I do see some friends, they see themselves as, okay, my goal to study architecture is to get an AR. So that's their goal. And then they see that as the primary ultimate goal in a way that, okay, I've been studying my part 1 and part 2, and after I done my part 3, meaning to say I'm totally worth it to study all this kind of thing. So I'm not sure, do you see that it will become a challenge or a threat for those people who don't want to be an AR, but they still interested in doing AR in architecture?
I think you need to know like your identity, you know, and what you want to do. I think that's most important.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of younger people, they don't know what they want to do yet. So
yeah,
that's why I think it's important to just get some industry, you know, insights, or maybe to sort of do more research to figure out, you know, like who are their mentors or the type of practice or the specialization that they are doing. You know, it could be anything. And I think if I want to relate back to like where it went, and for me, like I said, you know, like I specialize into urban design and also consulting, development strategy. So this is very different from, it wasn't my interest to do project implementation, you know, in terms of construction and also contract administration. Maybe more contract administration, but I do I do love reading contracts. So that's like a different thing. So that's why I mean it was a missed opportunity. But I guess I have a bigger interest in urban design. I don't think in terms of helping, because I realized that PEM and LEM is basically very dedicated towards, you know, regulating architecture. So I have no need for regulation. But I think for PEM, I think I would feel need to basically open up more discussion about practices within the by architects that are beyond the conventional practices that falls under like future practices and the other economic, you know, activities that architects do. And right now I feel that it's a bit more centered towards construction or architecture engineering services, you know. So again, we talked about it a lot in terms of the entire thing. A lot of people are not talking about intellectual property in academia. So I think that's also like a really big miss. Yeah, and architecture, but not so legal practices. I think it's about the law. So I think it's important to abide by the law, but it's also, I think it's much more better to understand the limitations of law and where you can grow. So for me and a lot of people, I think we clearly understand. So we actually we read and we understand what it means, you know, but we also know what we want. So they might be different thing, you know. So knowing the law and versus knowing what I want to do, you know, sometimes it doesn't even, you know, like overlap. So it's okay. But I know for some people, if they want to, I mean, I can't say that, but there's a lot of people who basically do, you know, limited works, you know. So I think you would have to ask those people, what do they really want? If they want to basically provide services for more complex projects, you know, obviously they should be in a legal practice because they should be they should be responsible to the law. And also, if you say, you know, is having a peer or a platform, you know, validation of your capability, obviously people are going to look at you with like an additional, you know, like relevance. So, you know, I would say it would be good to have an AR, but again, the question is what do you do with it, and how does it add value to your business? Yeah.
I actually would like to throw open questions. Maybe next time we can talk about it. But I think
10 minutes.
What about? Oh yeah, 10 minutes. Okay. I mean the question is, does PEM like care about like people who are actually architectural trained, but in the end they swap into like still in art based like renderers or graphic designers or like BIM modelers, right? Those are people are still in architecture, but they are not practicing architects. Are they still part of the concern, you know, or the group of community in PEM? So that's my open question. But I think we are running out of time. So
you mean will they
we
be
can talk about it.
you mean will they be appreciated by PAM as equally as normal?
Are they valid? Are they valid to be inside this PAM party? I don't know.
I think like what they answered earlier, like PAM next, it consists of multiple disciplinary people, not necessarily someone design handbags, someone design websites, someone design graphics, so not necessarily architecturally trained. Correct me if I'm wrong. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah, but PAM is just as strong as its representation and its constituency. So its constituency depends on the representation. So it's a back and forth thing. So to whether or not they care, the amount that they care depends on the representation within it. So if there's less representation, there's less care lah.
For me, for example, I'm really waiting to know all the other specialists. Like, to be honest,
the more diverse it is, the better, actually.
Specifically for me, because I'm looking at urban tech, I really wonder. For me, I mean, there's a few people here from academic institution. Like, I want to know what does the academia, what does it want, as an institution? Not to say what you want for your students, but what do you see like your roles and how you are you interested to sort of get on the platform to represent like the change that you need, and what are those manifesto from academia to push, because the it's not just the industry. For me and Pian, I think we fall under on the industry cluster, but we really need to know like academia to be sort of to be united and send a manifesto, not to be confused with the student association, because that's generally for students in uni, right? But we need to know like what is needed, what's the problem, what's the thinking right now, and where's the gap between industry need and what academia thinks should be the right way to educate.
Thanks. Yeah, I think to conclude that the summary of this whole thing is the key about the diversity of it. I think it's really conclude very well on our 4 topics.
Oh, I think Heffern's want to say something. Or Kawa, I saw the mic on off, and also Nicholas a bit earlier.
Any last word anyone want to add before? Okay, I do want to add something though. I think it's adding on to what Sufyan said regarding the compliance earlier, and also Amos' questions. I think having the basic knowledge for the legal compliance, it's like a basic requirement for every architect. It's okay. But what I'm trying to say is sometimes I find it's not what I mean, for example, you're designing a building, that's fine, a brand new building, but I have came across a project whereby I have to do a renovation to an existing building. So it's an A&A work. So I just have to design a small portion of the building, but the client just throw you the entire building plan. Hey, can you make sure the existing building comply to all the rest of the latest fire code? And then you'll be spending 90% of your time checking if this is compliant to the road, this compliant to the fire, this compliant to the water. And then there's only 5% doing the design. And then how do you answer to the client that, no, I don't care about complying or not, I just want to do the design? And then, that's I think, that's the moment that I realized that, shit, becoming a QP, so qualified person is what we call in Singapore, becoming a QP or AR, just making sure the compliance is not about design anymore, but depending on the job that you get. So I think the idea of the building surveyor or the building control in UK is actually a good idea, as if rather than the AR taking up all the responsibility. That's my biggest takeaway for today lah. Yep. You want to add any last word before we can end? We end tonight?
I'm just really sorry I was late.
No, I think you're fine. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
my apologies. But I think it's been a good session. I can't believe it's almost 4 hours of discussion.
You guys are really brutal. The ones that are still with us.
Yeah, the one that is still with us, 18, not sure if they just leave their phone on or their camera on, they are gone somewhere else.
No, they're champions.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you. This is longer than a 2-hour movie. We started at 8.
So sorry.
No wonder Nazmi left already. Okay.
But thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
I think today is actually very, very fruitful to get to know the memorandum so much in depth, and then to hear from the author themselves as well. Thank you again, Sufyan, and thank you, Taufiq.
you so much. Yeah.
So before we end, we have a traditional whereby we're gonna have a Zoom feed. So can everyone turn on their camera? We only have 5 minutes left before it cuts itself. Then we're gonna have a selfie. All right. Can one turn on? Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, thanks guys. Good night. I hope you have a good night. Thank
Take care,
you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Guys, bye.